What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Mean Enough Podcast. I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And this is the podcast where we talk about your favorite directors and the deeper meaning within their movies. And this episode, we're talking about, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinions, the blockbuster GOAT himself.
Oh, of course, yeah.
James Cameron. He's still the king of the box office after all these years and after Star Wars trying so hard.
Yeah, he'll never be
but
beat down.
he remains the box office king. We're going to talk about all his films. We're going to talk about his inspiration behind the films and some other stuff that I've read up on and been keeping up on. So this episode's going to be a fun one. But before we do that, guys, we're going to jump into last week's episode where we talked about Brad Bird. And we're going to read your comments. Now, this episode didn't do that hot. It didn't do that great.
I want people to tune
a couple of you saw the video. And that's okay.
The iTunes supporters still holding steady. I'm looking at you guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm always keeping check on y'all.
It's 180 million opening weekend for Incredibles 2. And like 200 views for it. So can we get a little bit of that, guys? Can we get a little bit?
Hey, man, 90 million of that is kids, and they're not looking for the deeper meanings and
that's very true.
Superhero animated films.
Still, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's enormous.
It's a crazy amount of money, man. 2 generations worth.
Let's read a comment from The Fleece 2 says, looking forward to listening to this, dudes. Any chance we could get some old school stuff? Maybe some Paul Schrader or Walter Hill. Keep it up, guys.
Yeah, Walter Hill would be interesting. Yeah, we saw a lot of that stuff in film school. I mean, we kind of want to do as many of the contemporaries as possible.
Yeah, I mean, think about First Reform too, right? Which is what Paul Schrader's doing right now. I'm pretty sure I'm right on that.
I think so.
I don't know if I'm wrong on that, but it's kind of gone from the box office as far as people watching the movie. I want to see the movie. I'm probably going to see it sometime this week, but I don't know. We'll figure it out. We definitely want to do some older guys because I know we don't want to just do current directors. We want to do some old school directors as well, and I know RB3 has more knowledge of that than I do. So we're definitely going to jump into that. Allah Ahmad 1000 says, "Hey Ace, when are we going to see you in the Inner Geekdom? Please tell me it's soon."
Ooh.
My answer is it's always gonna be my answer.
This guy in Inner Geekdom.
Hey man,
tweet at our commish, Dad Williams or Christian Roloff, and tell them you want to see Ace, Andres Cabrera in the Inner Geekdom League. I guess after the tournament.
Yeah, tournament.
Yeah.
Interesting. Gunslinger 199 says Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol was the first movie I saw in IMAX, and it was amazing. You know what's funny? When I read that comment, because I read it before, I think because I said I saw it in IMAX too last week. I think that was my first IMAX viewing too.
Really?
Yeah, I don't recall because I remember looking at the ticket stub and being like, did I really pay this much money for it? Like, what is so special about this? And then they were like, oh no, it's IMAX. And I was like, all right, this better be good.
Right.
But I think it might have been like Avatar though.
I was going to say, I was going to say that when we got to that, I was going to say that was my first IMAX
never mind. Was wrong.
But IMAX 2D, probably, right?
Yeah.
IMAX 2D?
IMAX 2D. I don't do 3D, guys, which is going to be an interesting conversation when we talk about Avatar, but I don't do 3D. Like, I hate 3D. Mm-hmm. Jonathan Peck says, what should Brad Bird do next? What should his next project be? Another animated film or go back to live action? What do you think, RB3?
For Brad Bird? Mm-hmm. His next film, I guess, is animated. So.
Oh, really? Is it?
Well, I guess The Incredibles 2, right?
Yeah, but I'm saying like after that.
After that?
Yeah.
I like his animated films. He's for the most part was Incredibles, Ratatouille, Iron Giant. He's 3 for 3, 4 for 4 if you count Incredibles 2.
Sure.
Whereas his live action stuff, he's a little more hit and miss. Ghost Protocol was a hit. Tomorrowland was a miss, but so. I'd be interested to see what he does live action again, but animated is, I think where he most hones in his talent, and I'd appreciate to see more of that too. So
sure, I agree. I think animated is definitely in his wheelhouse. Even though I still, like I said last week, Ghost Protocol, that tower scene is still one of the greatest scenes I've seen for like any movie as far as like action scenes. It's incredible. Yash says you guys should do Kubrick episode. The re-release of 2001 in 70mm has been retaining a pre-screen average for multiple weeks now, and in terms of sheer symbolism and philosophical depth, his movies remain unrivaled. Yes.
Yeah.
Very unrivaled.
That'd be a tough episode.
I was going to say, that's a lot.
To come in
that's like a 4.5 hour episode.
8-page essays for each movie, you know what I mean? As they're flipping through it.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. A part 1 and part 2 would be like 3 hours each.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely.
It's almost like a 3-parter.
Yeah,
if
man.
anything else.
I mean, shit, he got like 10 movies, 9 movies, something like that?
I think he's got 10 or 11.
I think, something like that.
It might be 11.
I don't know.
Are you a Kubrick guy? That's going to be our last comment.
No, I'm big on Kubrick, bro. I mean, I even wanted, I campaigned to have a Kubrick category in the Schmodown, like, for the longest time, and they added it, and I never spun it. I always wanted to spin it, but I couldn't. Man, I love all of his movies. I mean, of course, in film school, we watch all of his movies repeatedly, again and again and again and again. But I love all of them. I love Lolita. I love Doctor Strangelove is one of my favorite, like, political satire films. The Vietnam film. I can't remember.
Apocalypse Now?
No, Full Metal Jacket.
Oh.
Full Metal Jacket is like one of my favorite war films.
What did I say?
Apocalypse Now.
Just the first Vietnam film that comes to my head.
Well, hey, but to me, so that's weird.
I was going to say, do you like Full Metal Jacket more?
Oh, that's interesting because I think Apocalypse Now is like the better movie. But the one that I would like go and rewatch more is Full Metal Jacket. I just find Full Metal Jacket like more entertaining.
Sure.
And I guess, the first 45 minutes of it is a lot stronger. And of course, that's what a lot of people talk about. But I still like a lot of the second half of it. I like the symbolism and what they go for a lot in the second half of Full Metal Jacket a lot. But I think in terms of like the crafted movie and like the movie that's way more influential into the iconography of Vietnam, I think Apocalypse Now serves that a lot better. And I think there's better sequences and moments in Apocalypse Now. But what I go back and watch more and more is Full Metal Jacket.
Sure.
So every Kubrick film I appreciate a lot. Even 2001, I don't like. I'm probably in the minority a little bit. I don't like necessarily I really appreciate that movie.
This is the movie that inspired like everyone.
Hey, listen, no, it's beautiful, gorgeous. You know what I mean? Like it's very nice to look at, and all of the themes and all that is dope. You know what I mean? But it's a hard film to like sit through. And I saw the 70mm version, not this release, but my freshman year in college.
I was gonna say I want to catch that.
Yeah,
I
haven't seen the new restored version. I haven't seen the new one.
I walked out of Incredibles 2 with a buddy of mine, and we saw the poster for the 2001 Space, and I was like, I want to see that. And I turned to him, and I was like, I have to see that. I hope it's still around. I'm sure it is in LA.
I think it is. Yeah,
in LA, it's
Nolan was behind that restoration, right? Yeah. So
inspired Nolan, bro. Come on.
Yeah, I love it, bro. I love it, but you're not
a fan of Hal?
I just have to, you have to really. you can't just randomly be like, hey, I want to watch 2001.
Yeah, it's not like really... a movie you're gonna be like sit down in your living room and eat a box of cereal and watch 2001 Space Odyssey. Right. I'm gonna watch Jumanji instead. It's like a random movie. Let's get into James Cameron, guys. Something I did, and I texted RB3 about it because I freaked out over the weekend, was discover a TV show apparently that James Cameron has called The Story of Science Fiction with James Cameron. It's on AMC, and apparently it was on like months back, but I never caught it because I don't have TV. But I found it online, and I just binged all the episodes.
Only 6 episodes, you said, right?
Yeah, 6 episodes, and he interviews George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Guillermo del Toro, and Chris Nolan. Oh, and Arnold Schwarzenegger too. But for the directors, those 5 guys who are like, pretty much goats. And he's pretty much just gushing about sci-fi and what is the inspiration. Like a lot of talk about 2001, a lot of talk about H.G. Wells, a lot of talk about all these books that inspired science fiction directors back in the 30s, back in the 40s when they were making these movies. It's incredibly interesting. It's basically a giant meaning of... But meaning of sci-fi.
Yeah, and they actually get to talk to the people that they're inspired by.
It's great, and it's funny. You know what's funny too is it has your homegirl in it too, and she's in it a lot. Amy Nicholson.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh nice.
She's in it a lot. Like she always gets the sound bites and stuff, and she's talking about because she's like
interviewing them or
no, she's like doing a in-person camera interview. like a Cameron.
Okay.
Because she's like the movie critic / expert, and then they give a shout out to the canon. But there's a few critics on there, like the TV Line critics on there, the BBC guys on there, and my homegirl, the girl I talked about back in episodes past, Alyssa Wilkinson from Vox. She makes an appearance as well. Who I always told you guys that I cater towards her written reviews, because we talked about, you know, what reviewers we like. I like her quite a bit.
Right.
And she's in it too. She makes like a small appearance, not as much as Amy. But it's incredibly interesting. I highly recommend it. And it's basically kind of getting inside James Cameron's passion for sci-fi. Like unabashed, untethered, unstoppable passion that he has. That's never going to fade away kind of thing. And he loves it. Like he talks to the directors and it's pretty fascinating.
Right.
And they're all big personalities too. I mean, think about like George and Steven and Guillermo and Chris Nolan too. So it's very interesting, and that's kind of where that's my research for the weekend. But it's cool because you also get to see his interests and what he was into, and the kind of films that he wanted to make. Because in a way, except for maybe Titanic, all his films are kind of sci-fi films.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think that's where, you know, his focus has always been as a director. Even something as Titanic just being like this romantic drama, it still has kind of a blockbustery ending to it. So, sure. You know, it kind of all makes sense. That's the through line that inspires them.
Speaking of blockbuster, I was going to ask you what I did last time is, what is your first experience with Mr. Jimmy Cameron?
Jimmy Cameron?
Mr. James Cameron.
Well, you know, I can't tell you my first experience because I might not necessarily like be remembering it, because my grandma used to love like the movies like Kill Bill, you know, like she would love something like Terminator or Terminator 2 or Alien.
Really?
So, yeah, it's weird.
That's crazy.
She's into weird shit, but not weird shit, but dope shit.
Yeah.
But so I probably watched that a lot younger, so I wasn't like too familiar if this is a James Cameron movie. But I always talk about my first like the movie that inspired me to go into filmmaking is the Avatar 2009 when it came out. So that was the first time I saw a movie. It's like, oh, this is James Cameron. This is what this guy does. And then, and through discovering it that way, then I started going back and looking at, you know, some of his, and even Titanic too. Even though Titanic was probably something my mom watched like a lot in the house when I was younger, so I don't necessarily remember that. Watching that as a kid, be like, oh, it's a James Cameron movie. But watching Avatar for the first time was like, oh, this is a director who has this consistent like through line of science fiction throughout his filmography. Let me go back and retrack all of his stuff, and that's when I really became a huge fan and admired his work a lot more. Yeah, that's very interesting, and I want to get into a different conversation that I haven't done on previous episodes. After I told you my first, which is obviously Titanic, that movie was everywhere, and I'm a kid from the '90s too, so I remember that stuff blew up. And I remember the VHS tape, which was like, I think it was 3 VHSs because the movie was so long, or 2. It might have been 2. And I just remember like my mom, like you said, my mom is the one who catered towards Titanic the most. Right. And she really enjoyed the movie, and that was kind of Leo DiCaprio's, you know, big come up, and that was like the biggest movie ever of all time. Right. Which it still kind of is. Yeah. And, you know, because Avatar had a little bit of benefit through the 3D, in my opinion. I mean, everyone's opinion too. But I want to get into a conversation differently now. I just kind of feel like doing this just because you brought it up. On a personal take, especially now in 2018 that we're living in right now, because you have a personal connection to James Cameron, and I kind of do too. I want to hear what's your personal view of the guy? Because for me, I think he's like a legend, a goat, a genius, someone who, you know, is very inspirational when it comes to filmmaking. But a lot of people right now are jumping off the James Cameron train. I don't know if you've noticed that, especially when it comes to him like bashing other movies or trying. Well, that's the biggest problem I feel like with him. He just got to stop talking. Like talking, he loves talking. I mean, he loves going on interviews and trash and shit. Dude, and it's like you gotta. So I thought, what's your personal view? I mean, I think he's a genius, and I think he deserves to be the genius that he's so rightfully acclaimed as. And I think that. We should acknowledge the vast influence that his films have throughout the history of cinema. But that being said, like, I can't really take this guy in too much stock on his movie opinions, not necessarily because I disagree with him, but because it's like a lot of times it seems like it's coming from a place of bitterness almost to a certain extent.
Sure.
And particularly I was thinking, with the most recent comments he made about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, how those movies are just, about middle-aged men without families or whatever, and he said they're all the same and whatnot. It felt like the timing of those comments, which came immediately, like a day after Black Panther surpassed Avatar as in terms of the domestic box office, it seemed the way that was timed out, it makes it look like you're being bitter towards the Marvel movies now, because your movie got passed up. Same thing with Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman becomes a highly successful character, and it's like, oh, you're feeling bitter because you kind of did that first, and like we get it, we appreciate that you.
Forgot about the Wonder Woman.
Yeah. It's like we appreciate that you laid the groundwork for these characters and for women empowerment in action movies, but like you shouldn't comment out of bitterness, and you know what I'm saying. So that's my only thing with James Cameron is like,
yeah, that's a very fair point. What did you think about his comments though? Either or.
To a certain extent, he's right about the Marvel movies to a certain extent, right? Like when he talks about how when they all kind of follow a similar character kind of trajectory, that's a valid criticism I think most people would make about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But that being said, there's a lot of his movies that like aren't too much better when it comes to at least when it comes to movies like True Lies, right, or some of his other films are very much about like the machismo dude going out into the world solo by himself. And of course, a lot of his movies also have a woman protagonist as well, too, a female protagonist. But it's a difficult. It's a difficult kind of gauge when the formula for Marvel is clearly working. We're clearly still enjoying it as audience members, even though it's not necessarily original. It's still refreshing to us the way they tell those stories individually. So, but to a certain extent he's right, and then to a certain extent I think the Wonder Woman comments I don't agree necessarily, but I could see his point. You know what I mean? I could see that, and the fact that And the fact that I can't remember exactly what he was saying about it, but
he's saying it wasn't new, is what he was saying.
Well, yeah, of course he's gonna say that because he created that kind of archetype.
I think he made it a point to say the difference between the two, and how he made it a point to talk about the sexuality of Wonder Woman and how she's wearing a booty short and a tiny skirt, and she's just flaunting, and she's basically naked, which is kind of true. She is. And how this has been around forever. People always love girls who wear very little and are like badass, but are still like shaking their ass.
I get that, but it's also I just think that's like her costume, So so I just wish James Cameron.
He's a very loud guy. He's a very I just think he's just a very loud guy. I don't think that should discredit him.
No. It shouldn't discredit him at all.
No, I'm saying what a lot of people have.
Yeah.
So my personal opinion, I really do feel like the guy is super smart. He's a genius, and he's made a lot of like groundbreaking stuff. Like almost like, not quite George Lucas level, but almost kind of George Lucas level.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And to have the biggest still every time I watch like a box office show, they talk about like in the worldwide charts, and it's still like freaking Avatar, Titanic, still 1 and 2. Like that's crazy.
I don't think they're ever gonna get. I don't think they're ever gonna get touched.
Wild.
Yeah,
that's crazy. Like to do that, that's pretty. It's like I know I'm not necessarily hyped for 5 Avatar films, but hey, man, sure, go for it.
Well, listen, man, you got we're gonna talk about in this episode. James Cameron is the king of sequels. Terminator 2. Many people consider Aliens. Piranha Part 2, of course.
And that's where we're going to begin, guys, with the great first feature of Mr. James Cameron, Piranha Part 2: The Spawning. 1981. The poster is a giant piranha looking up at a girl with her booty out in a bikini. James Cameron always looking towards the strong female and no sexual.
Hey man, well maybe it's not his fault. Now I heard the whole story behind this movie is that they greenlit the sequel of Piranha.
Sure.
because it's following, you know, of course, the Jaws hype, you know, Jaws, then Piranha, you know, Piranha 2, and want to keep the whole water, I think, you know, bait thing. So I heard basically it was like they designed the poster first, they like got the marketing stuff ready.
Yeah, I'm looking at the new poster. It says "Who's for dinner?" and it's a girl in a bikini looking at flying piranhas.
Yeah. So it was probably, and I heard they fired Cameron after a week of filming or something like that. So. Might not necessarily be his fault this time.
I kind of never. I'm thinking stupid stuff right now. I just drank too much coffee, guys. But I was like, I kind of feel you, bro. I'm looking at a piranha, and he's just like chasing that girl, and I'm like, that's me.
Oh shoot! There's somebody else in the.
But yeah, I mean, Piranha Part 2 is very schlocky B-movie type stuff.
Right.
And it's much more of like a scary type thing, which James Cameron is pretty good at. Like he's really good at like doing creepy, scary type shit. And that's kind of what he's done for a few movies. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those movies like you just said. It's not really Cameron.
Yeah. I think, you know, and that's a funny story that comes up with a lot of the directors we talk about, right? Same thing happened with Fincher and Alien 3.
Sure.
Same thing happened with some other directors who got their movies like pretty much snatched away from them for their first time out, but they ultimately come back and hit it off big. So
yeah, and speaking of hitting it off big, that movie started in 1984, The Terminator.
Oh yeah.
Now, full disclosure, I love this movie. I've recently rewatched it, and I think, and I know a lot of people don't think so, but I think it holds up. I think the story holds up. I think it's interesting. I think the way he reveals information throughout the time, because you kind of don't know what's going on through it. Like halfway throughout the movie, you start to learn more and more and more and more. And even the final scene of the movie, you kind of discover certain things that were there. I think it's incredible storytelling, and I mean, obviously cutting edge technology as well when it comes to the creation of the Terminator, and just the idea itself of like time travel. It's like, and he talked about it in his science fiction show, but the idea of like traveling through time and the concepts of like changing the future, changing the past, who inspired who was there first. Those kind of, I love time travel, so I'm kind of partial towards it, and I know a lot of people hate time travel, but I love time travel. So I think it's very interesting, and it's also a question on AI, right?
Right.
And it's a question on what's coming up with AI and how, if we kind of take our hands off the wheel and try to make our lives easier with AI, it could eventually turn into something negative, which is Skynet.
Killer monsters. I love the first Terminator movie, and this is what you really consider James Cameron's like true debut to be. It's very independent, very low budget, but very expressive in the way that it's a science fiction tale that takes place in like this grisly real world environment. This kind of cyberpunk, and you know, this really did influence an entire generation of cyberpunk going forward, because of course the sci-fi punk kind of genre was beginning to emerge in the 70s, early 80s, but this movie kind of put that to the forefront, to the mainstream, and really broke out the whole time travel bubble. This came out before Back to the Future, so this in combination with Back to the Future, which Robert Zemeckis was doing, kind of brought a new life to the time travel genre as well. Whereas Back to the Future approaches it through a comedic effect, this one approaches it through almost, I feel like, a horror movie effect, right? Like the horrors of technology, the horrors of science fiction. I think that's something that James Cameron contemplates a lot throughout his filmography, right? How the advancement of technology could come to our behest, to our downfall, and how our reliability on technology instead of like the real world, instead of the environment, is working into our demise. So I think that's very prominent in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I watched the behind the scenes for it, the making of the Terminator. It's very interesting because obviously these people don't know, the actors don't know what's going to become of this movie,
right?
But they're still very confident. There was specifically Michael Biehn was. I can see the light went out too. So can we cut that out?
I mean, we can keep going.
Yeah, we can keep going, but I'm saying like.
Oh yeah, we can. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I lost my train of thought. Can I go back and say, I watched the behind the scenes? Cool. Mm-hmm. It was all my entire neighborhood, by the way.
Really?
So I could see the light off from where there was a light on the outside.
Oh, shoot.
So I saw the behind-the-scenes documentary for the Terminator, and it's very interesting too because these actors that they're interviewing on set don't really know what's going to become of this movie, right? Mm-hmm. And their thoughts on James Cameron is kind of interesting, especially Michael Biehn, who basically says like, "Oh yeah, I knew right away this guy's a genius. He's super smart. He knows what he's doing. You know, this is a crazy action movie." And then Arnold, they interview Arnold quite a bit, and it's pretty funny seeing Arnold's reaction. He's like, "Oh, this is a very different." I can't do an Arnold impression. It's very different from Conan. It's very different because I'm the bad guy, and I really wanted to do this movie. But James talks about how he casted Arnold because he wanted to literally make like an unstoppable force. Like no matter what you do, you can't stop this guy. Mm-hmm. And he embodied that persona, is what he saw in Arnold, and obviously keeping his, emotions and action very robotic was kind of what Arnold was going for. But it's very interesting because they talk about the effects and the practical effects and the action scenes, and this is a different time, man. It's different from like most of the CGI stuff that was starting to come out later on. Mm-hmm. But it's incredibly interesting, and it shows you what James Cameron goes into when it comes to sci-fi filmmaking. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's the brilliant part about it, right? Is because even though it can't be like this kind of convoluted thing, it has a very basic through line, right? It does deal in the idea of maternity, right? And what does your future decisions, or what does your decisions in the present mean in the future, and how that could affect a woman and pregnancy and maternity, and her son ends up leading a revolution, and how it's a very interesting kind of strange concept that if you don't give birth to said revolutionary, there won't be like there will be demise or whatever. So it's just but stopping it before it even happens. So it's just really interesting how it plays with that idea, and how something as nasty and ugly as the way technology is portrayed in this film would only come up with an idea of going back in time and killing somebody.
Yeah, that's even the greater point of this whole thing is the concept of like, who came up with this? It's like the robots are like, what if we go back in time though? Right. Like that's some high level thinking, bro. Like that's some very creative thinking. Right. As far as like, man, if we go back in time and kill his mom, then we won't have this problem. Mm-hmm. But that's a very interesting point. That it kind of starts out with that. Yeah, I mean, I love this movie, and obviously it starts off, James Cameron's career, and it jumps him off to greater heights, and unfortunately what we get afterwards is The Abyss. So The Abyss came out.
Aliens too, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, Aliens came out afterwards.
Okay.
So here's an interesting thing. I saw James Cameron's TED Talk, where he talked about what he wanted to be when he grew up, and he said his entire life he was always interested in like aliens and like outer space and like weird planets and weird creatures, and he was obsessed with that. And he learned in school that there is like another kind of alien world on this planet itself, and that's underwater. And he talked about how from then on he wanted to be like, he got a certification to be a scuba diver, like he wanted to be a pro scuba diver, and he really enjoyed the alien kind of life that's there, that he said that there's species underwater that we still haven't identified, which to me is my cue to nope.
Definitely not going.
That's my cue to be like, nope. I hate the ocean. I hate like the ocean. Like obviously the beach is fine, but the ocean. Because when I'm on a boat, I'm freaking out because I'm like, if I fall in there, dude, a freaking Xenomorph is gonna come and just be like, oh, and then just suck me under. Yeah. Because I've seen those documentaries that talk about those creepy ass fish. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're like demons from hell. Wow. They look so freaky. And they're so deep down there that it's pitch black because the sun doesn't reach down there, and it's just anyways, he talked about that, and funny enough, he got the sequel to Ridley Scott's pretty well received Alien, and he wanted to kind of take that mentality of like outer space, weird place, and Aliens is a lot of people's favorite action movie, favorite a sequel. It's a pretty significant movie when it comes to franchises. Right. Think about what's going on now with Disney and Fox, right? Everyone's talking about what's going to happen to this. I'm like, what's going to happen to aliens, bro? Disney with aliens? Oh, that's not going to happen. Yeah. They might just kill it. But I doubt it because there's too much money in IP these days. Yeah.
They could probably make a good aliens movie. Maybe that's what they could.
Maybe, or they're going to be like, who's this, Mom? I don't know. It's just like a super Disney-fied alien.
Right.
It's like, who's at the door? It's the Xenomorph, and he's like, hey, guys. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, Disney wouldn't do that. That's stupid.
No,
but I'm saying like
I would love to see like a Xenomorph park at Disneyland. Wouldn't that be pretty dope?
That would be dope. I still want to go to. So a friend of mine went to the Xenomorph aliens themed VR experience, which is I think in Orange County. And I screamed, like I was like, oh my god, I want to go so bad because it's a theme VR experience where you're like trapped in a spaceship and you have to get out with your buddies, and it's all VR, but it's motion VR. So it's the same people who did the Star Wars one. That's in Anaheim, and so basically you're walking on an alien ship, you have the gun, and you're like fighting off xenomorphs. I'm down. I don't care if it sucks because I still want to do it. But yeah, the idea of like a xenomorph theme thing or a xenomorph thing. I still remember when I went to Halloween Horror Nights. With Copster and Cody, my first time, and I think it was like I was super fresh to schmoes, and they were like, yeah, we want to go to Horror Nights, do you want to come? And I was like, hell yeah, I want to come. And we all agreed that the best maze was the aliens theme one. It was aliens and predators theme, right?
Yeah.
But that that was the best one. It was so cool because the obviously the predators helped out too, but the alien stuff, we saw people like come out at you, and then you saw a freaking like chest burster pop out. Like it was really fun. Like that was the best one. And then at the end of the maze, you see a giant queen from Aliens, really? And it's pretty fun, dude. And it's like a obviously like a remodeling of it, but it's like 30 feet high. Yeah. So you look up and you're like, and it's like reaching down at you and stuff. It's like a robot, but people like it, and it's really fun. So maybe you're onto something, man. Maybe Disney would kill it. I don't know. Yeah, well, I just get afraid.
I know they have a part. I went to Disney World once upon a time. One time.
I've never been.
Yeah, it was dope. So they have like this one ride that like takes you through a bunch of different movies, like the history of movies or whatever, and like, but it's just like a ride, like a boat ride or something. I don't know. It was or a car ride. Why I say boat? But it was like they take you through Indiana Jones and they take you through Aliens, and it's like all these like weird xenomorphs. Like it's like one of those cave. It's like what's that joint? It's a Small World. It's like that, but like with like not as annoying and bigger. And with like all the like you just go through the different worlds of each movie like as you ride through the thing. So it's pretty dope. So
how was that in Disney World?
I don't know.
It's a Universal property, isn't it?
Oh, they had Indiana Jones for sure. They had Aliens for sure. They had a Fast and Furious show, if I'm not mistaken. And it was like different. It was all different. This different.
Was Disney World?
I think. Or maybe it wasn't. No, it wasn't Fast and Furious. Sorry, it was another Indiana Jones like stunt show. But it was like they had all these different like. Different. Are you sure
this is not Universal Studios?
No, bro. I'm telling you, it's Disney, bro.
I was gonna say all those properties.
No. Well, Indiana Jones is Paramount, and then the other one is Fox. Aliens is Fox. Sure. So like they're just going for different.
I was gonna say, but Fast and Furious is Universal.
Yeah. But then that wasn't Fast and Furious. No, it was something else. But
it was cool.
It was dope. It was dope the way they had it set up. I'm like, damn, if they had a whole park like this, that'd be pretty dope. Motherfuckers in xenomorph costumes, like walking around, like that'd be pretty amazing.
People like it, man. I mean, what obviously I've seen a lot of behind the scenes because Aliens is one of my favorite franchises, the Alien franchise. Like my brother and I, my dad loves it too. He's the one who got me up on it. But we love it. So I find it interesting because one of the greatest parts of Alien and Aliens, and people will never, everyone agrees with this, is the design of Geiger. Geiger's design, or Giger?
Yeah, H.R. Giger.
H.R. Giger is the one he created is like so unique and so original, so weird yet cool, yet steampunk, yet not really steampunk, and creepy. And that's the design of the Xenomorph, too. People love that design. It's one of the best designs in all of Hollywood, in my opinion, when it comes to creature effects. So yeah, I mean,
yeah, and then I know Cameron adjusted the design like slightly.
He did
to make them look more humanistic, which is really fascinating. And he also designed the whole Queen, right? At the end of the film, he was the person, or not him, but Stan Winston was the guy who designed the whole aesthetic of the Queen and everything.
Speaking of Queen, this movie definitely has a theme of motherhood.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Is that what you take out the biggest from the movie?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest part of it because, when you watch the original Alien, and the original Alien is a great horror movie in and of itself. It's kind of almost similar to the Terminator, the first Terminator, but almost in a different kind of way where it revolves around these blue-collar trucker dudes who are like up in space or whatever. Like the below the line, not the below the line, but the like mid to like low income, like kind of poverty, kind of blue collar, have to work for their earnings and stuff like that kind of dudes, which is different than what we see in most sci-fi films. They're like these astronauts or these super elaborate dudes. This one is much more rooted in the like breast belt kind of field, with Ridley Scott making the choice of not like identifying characters by like gender or race, but just by casting people in them. So Ripley was written not as a man or a woman, just as a character, and then they cast Sigourney Weaver as it. So it doesn't really have any feminine qualities really in the first one, where I feel like the second one amplifies the femininity to a much higher level. We speak about motherhood when it comes to the relationship between Ripley and Newt, when you talk about the Queen and rebirth and evolution, because the whole thing with the Xenomorph is a metaphor for like birth and death, evolution, and all of these like
life, creation,
creation and destruction. All of these really impactful themes. Where in the second one that those themes are amplified through the motherhood, the femininity, and all that, and all those kind of things. So I think that was definitely more of a James Cameron's choice, as we see in a lot of his later films. He likes portraying strong women, so he made the choice of making it more female centric, more maternity focused, and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I also saw the behind the scenes for this movie, and they kind of talk about, but at the same time, not making her some gun-toting, crazy badass, throwing knives and like shooting people. And
right.
She's very much just like, I just learned how to shoot in the movie because Michael Bihn's character taught her. I forget his name. In the movie. But it's one of those things where he didn't want to make it like on crazy, like Alice in the Resident Evil movies. Like he didn't want to make it. Obviously, he didn't quote that. Didn't want to make it like a future movie. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a very different, strong female character. It's a strong female character in a grounded type way.
Right.
Where she's just trying to figure shit out.
Where she grows into.
Yeah. But she's super smart too. Like she's the smartest one in the crew. But she's not super smart because she's like, got Lex Luthor intellect or something. But she's just smart because of what she's been through.
Yeah, what she experienced in the last movie.
Yeah.
She understands that. I think that's the biggest part of it. And I think that amplifying that quality really makes Aliens stand out a lot from Alien.
Sure.
As well. My question for you though, Ace, I know a lot of people also say that Aliens is very, very much a metaphor for like Vietnam warfare in terms of like the nature, the technology versus the nature, the natural, the environment. But this kind of almost like a revisionist history where the technology does end up winning out in that war. Do you think that's something that Cameron is saying here? Because when you look at the creation of those characters in the first Alien, it's very much supposed to represent an Americana, like the average American blue collar worker. Taking that into the second film, it's like those workers going off to fight against the foreign species on their homeland and their environment. Do you see that comparison?
Sure, I can kind of see it, but then again, it's difficult because the Xenomorph is such a Prometheus, not Prometheus. Alien Covenant kind of dives into it a little more, but I feel like it's much more of a the fact that they're pure destruction, the fact that they're pure vengeance. It's almost like a fire. It's very, like you said, in a way it is like, because it's so natural, but at the same time it's so destructive. So you have that reaction to want to destroy it back, basically. So in a way, yes, because of the nature behind it, but in a way, no, because I don't feel like comparing Vietnamese to xenomorphs.
Right. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that.
I know you're not saying that, but that's kind of what I hesitate towards is because of that. But at the same time, I want to get into the military aspect of it, especially because I just rewatched this movie with my brother, who's never seen it before. And it's so interesting because I'm talking to him throughout the movie, and that's literally like, it's such a good point. Like, if you're going to go into like this, weird planet, like, bring me some United States Marines, bro. Like the biggest badasses, crazy killers on the planet. U.S. Marines. And it's like, yes, please bring me some U.S. Marines, because these guys know how to kill. Like, Marines, like, when it comes to branches of the division of the military, like, a lot of people don't know, but Marines are like, whew, they basically, a lot of Marines become special forces people and stuff like that, because they're so good at shooting and at killing, and they're specifically trained for that. But that's kind of why I was like, yeah, that would be my call too, bro. It's like, we're going into this weird planet, outpost, blah, blah, blah. Who you're going to take? I'm like, bring me some Marines, bro. Yeah. I don't want to jump into protect me, man, please. But it's very interesting because it plays with that fact too. And then the fact that they're so pumped to see action. They just want to shoot shit. Throughout the movie, like Vasquez, and Bill Paxton's character, and the homie who hangs out with Vasquez too, I forget his name, who dies first.
Right. House or something like that?
Yeah. And he's very, like, eager to be like, yo, let's shoot some shit, man. And that's why it's such an interesting point, because in the first act of the movie, they make it a point to be like, you can't shoot. It's like, why, man? Because of the...
Right, the acid.
Not the acid, the combustion that they said if a firearm goes off, it's going to combust. But yeah, it's such an interesting perspective to take, the military aspect of this movie and put him, the U.S. kind of in a weird predator type way, but the U.S.'s best killers against, this weird creature's nature's best killer, which is the xenomorph, because that's all they do is kill.
Right.
And spread their, egg everywhere. So I don't know, what your takeaway from the military aspect of this movie is?
No, I think that's a big presence, and that's also what that lends to the whole, like, Vietnam analogy thing too, right? I also think it's interesting how pumped up and how heavy the military force is on this foreign planet, considering how much we know about how much James Cameron cares about the environment, how much he cares about preserving the lands and stuff like that. So it's kind of the departure from, I guess, his, like, normal branch of reassuring environmental filmmaking. But it's interesting how it's portrayed in this, where the military is like a force against that. Whereas you watch something like Avatar, for example, which came many, many years later, it's almost the exact flip perspective, right? It's the perspective of the aliens fighting back against the military and winning that war.
That's very good.
So it's an interesting place in James Cameron's filmography, and I think that's fascinating because when you look at those two movies, Terminator and Aliens, those kind of end up flipping on themselves when his later movies, like when Terminator 2 comes out, the technology is the good side, and Avatar, the environment is the good guys, and the foreign in relative to Alien Planet, foreign military forces are perceived as the villains. So it represents an interesting place in James Cameron's life.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously we have to hit on the biggest theme in all the Alien movies, in my opinion, and probably the one that Ridley Scott really made it a point to talk about is basically the corporate overlord type feel, where it's like a product is worth more than a life. And they're willing to be like, nah, we're good. A couple lives cost us this much. This product cost us that much. And how, the whole point of Wayland is to they want the xenomorph so bad. Like in the first one, they just want to bring it back. They're like, bring one back because we want to study this shit because this shit is dope. And it's worth way more than, 10, 20, 30 people. And in this one, it comes back as well in the version of a military, right? Where the Marines are used as like a tool. and the corporate guy, I forget his name in the movie, but he plays a big part, is like, you know, I'm using my tool, man. Like, your life is worth shit. Like, I don't care if you die for your country and all this bullshit, because I just want to bring this species back, and if that means killing everyone here or everyone has to die, I'm good with that. But there's even that scene where he traps in Ripley and Newt in that little corridor and puts in a face hugger in there. And it's just like, hey, you wanted the face hugger to breed inside Ripley so you can bring back a xenomorph. I'm like, that's the most effed up thing ever. And then Ripley has that famous line where she says, like, you know, it's like, I don't know who's worse, you or the people. Because you don't see them, you know, wanting to F someone over for a percentage. And I was like, yo, that's such a good point, because it's about the corporate aspect when it comes to life and death situations. Like, the fact that everything nowadays is about money, it's about processing, and sometimes corporations don't care. If you know, we see that with car corporations. We see that with a lot of people that it's like, well, these people are going to die. And they're like, yeah, oh, well, we want this more.
And I think that's the biggest part of, you know, looking at this movie in the sense of, you know, the corporate aspect in relation to the military stuff, right? That's something that's very prominent in today's modern, like, politics too, right? Like how corporatized the military-industrial complex is, how much private companies and how much that influences the people who we invade and the weapons that they get paid by the United States government to make for those wars, you know? So it's just a whole circle. And by the way, did you hear about the whole thing with the Space Force?
I did.
Man, man.
I mean, we're gonna see aliens in the real life.
I don't know, man.
Starship Troopers.
To me, that's just another. To me, it's just another way of funding Raytheon and Boeing and all these private corporations to, you know, whatever. But it's just
it's also another way to militarize random shit.
Yeah,
let's militarize the space. It's like, what?
We have to run the space for the empire of the United States.
Let's put a military base on the moon. And it's like, why?
We have more military bases in throughout the world than most countries combined, you know? Sure. So it's just interesting that we have to now venture into space. Now, what is interesting, though, I do think it's fascinating that at least there's another renewed interest in space research and space and scientific funding to some extent. It does feel like a very corporate, greedy move, which, you know, aligns with what this movie has to say about its own representation of the guns in the military. Because this movie came out in 1986. This is the a lot of people consider it the Ronald Reagan era, right, where guns were cool and we're getting out of the Cold War, but you know, a lot of people, you know, we're getting a lot of these hyper machismo movies at this time that encourage a lot of gun, a lot of violence, a lot of like military stuff. So it's just fascinating that this kind of holds within that little pocket of, oh yeah, let's make shit blow up even though it's aliens. And that's some complaint for a lot of people too, right? Is how the rules of the universe are kind of altered and adjusted in this movie. Like when, you know, in the first movie when aliens had like explodes and the acid hits somebody, that's like a huge burn. Like they're almost dead off of that. Whereas in this movie, somebody shoots an alien and there's like, or they get like decommissioned off the acid, you know, getting hit with the acid. But it's not like as severe as it is in.
You know why? Because that man is a United States Marine.
Yeah.
That's kind of why.
Yeah. That's what it comes down to essentially. So
no, but yeah, I think that's. And also because they want to keep his character in the movie in order to kill him off later.
Right.
I think you're talking about Paxton's character, right?
Yeah.
He's the one who gets it on the arm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And it's also, I don't know, man. I got a lot of personal opinions on that kind of stuff because I'm kind of very pro-military or pro-veterans, I guess. I'm more
pro-veterans.
Pro-veterans is more, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how when I see more depictions and when I see more movies, how people will never realize the amount of shit that they put the veterans through, and then kind of be like, just like, oh, whatever, you're just a tool. Like, you're just something we can toss in a trash can and get another one. You're a factory line type shit. So it's very dangerous thinking, and it's the kind of thinking that goes into the United States government too, and not just corporations, the government itself. So it's interesting in this movie, but again, it comes down to like, you're right. It's like, yo, this Marine is gonna kick some ass. Like at the same time, it's that feeling that we get in that feel. Any last word on Aliens?
No, it's dope.
Is this do you like it better than Alien?
I think it's definitely more rewatchable than Alien. Definitely,
Sure.
And I think
is it a better film than Alien?
Well, I think Alien is a much better horror movie, and a better exercise. Action. I think it's a better action movie. I also think the first one was a better exercise in like suspense, I guess. But what I probably will say is the greater achievement is probably Aliens, just on the fact that it's one of the only sequels that manages to like wholly expand the universe and still make it successful and awesome. And even, a lot of people consider Aliens better. In terms of like acting wise, plot wise, character development wise. I mean, I think so. The first Alien doesn't really have as much meat in terms of like character. I think this one has a lot more of that. So
sure, that's a fair point. Yeah, I mean, I love Alien. I'm very partial towards Ridley Scott, who's like my favorite director probably. But yeah, Aliens is great too. I can't deny it. And obviously, it gave us one of the best. I mean, we talked about it quite a bit, but one of the best female characters ever with Ellen Ripley. And man. Did I love me some Sigourney Weaver that like, dude, it's hard for me personally. I'm sorry, guys. It's hard for me to rewatch it and not be like, damn, Sigourney. I'll be like that Piranha in that poster.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry, guys. But yeah, I love Sigourney Weaver, and I think she's great. And she definitely brings a lot to these movies. Now let's talk about The Abyss, which I was trying to get to beforehand. RB3, beforehand, you told me, before we started this episode, RB3 came up to me and he's like, hey man, I just want to say, let's save like a good 45 minutes on The Abyss, because I'm an expert in this movie.
Really?
And I was like, RB3, sure man, so here's, I'm going to give you the mic, right?
Everybody, The Abyss is the greatest motion picture ever made of all time. I'm just kidding, I haven't seen it. So this is the one James Cameron movie I have.
What excuse do you have, RB3?
Hey man, it's my birthday.
Yeah, I was gonna say
it was my birthday. Hey, just turned 21, everybody. I was gonna do a whole thing. I was gonna do a whole thing of like bringing a beer on the show and be like, hey, this is gonna be my first sip of alcohol. But I totally realized I drove here, so. I'm not trying to catch a DUI on my first. But one day, people, when I don't drive here, I will take a sip or two.
Okay.
Yeah. We're gonna do that. By the way, I mean this is also totally off topic, but I'm finally wearing the shirt that's in the thumbnail. I know a lot of people say I never actually worn the shirt itself.
Is that really comments you get?
Like one person, like a long time ago, when we still have viewers, you know what I mean? But like it's just funny. I'm fine. I'm wearing the shirt again. I don't know if that one viewer is still out there. Man, I didn't even see Tony Wanger in the comments last week.
Yeah, man, we're losing them, man. We're losing them.
Man.
We're losing them to other podcasts. Damn you, Wangers!
Yeah, Wangers and critically acclaimed, Schmodown Rundown. Yeah,
I guess. Either way, I mean, it's
where's those
fine.
after show guys been, man? I haven't seen them in a long time.
I have no idea. I mean, they're on a different network now.
Yeah. They don't even post on the channel anymore.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
Definitely.
That's all you, man. That's all you, bro. Yeah, I know. They're probably like, we're gonna pay these guys.
Yeah.
Let's give these guys jobs, and we're like, bruh. We've been there for years, though.
We should. You know what we should do, bro? We gotta start a beef with Ryan Snelling and Jay Williams,
so we can actually get people's attention.
Yeah. So Ryan Snelling, Jay Williams, if you're listening, if somebody take out this clip and send it to him. You guys' show is weak, lame. I'm starting beef with y'all. This is beef season. Ryan Snelling still haven't returned my text.
And we're doing it for the views.
Yeah, we're doing it for the views. I got a diss track coming for both of y'all. Stay tuned.
There you go, guys.
There you go.
The Abyss by James Cameron. I mean, this movie, it's funny because I once again, from the TED Talk that I heard from James Cameron, he talked about this movie, and he talked about it literally as a passion project. He said, I really wanted to make my biggest passion has always been scuba underwater diving, and I wanted to make a movie about that. And then I was like, why don't I just make a horror movie about that? Talking about what got me interested inside this world to begin with, which was the crazy, weird creatures that you can find down there, and that not a lot of people know what's down there because you can't see shit down there. So he decided to do that and make this story about a horror story about how this weird kind of liquid moving creature is attacking this crew, basically. And that was the passion project he has, but he admittedly says too that like no one really saw the movie. But what's great about this movie too is that this is his connection with ILM. This started it. Yeah. Because he's the creature in this movie, the weird liquidy effect is what eventually moved towards, which is T2,
right.
Which is the liquid metal, is it the T1000?
T1000, yeah.
T1000. And that is pretty much the biggest saving part of this movie. Sorry to all the Abyss fans out there.
Oh, wow, okay. So it's not well, you know, I think it's interesting that this movie takes place on the submarine. You know, you mentioned when we talked about Aliens, how his fascination with underwater stems from his fascination in outer space and seeing like foreign creatures. I think this movie kind of explores that. Right? It's kind of like the first Alien. It's kind of like the first Alien, but underwater, right? I mean, that's
sure. And it also comes with that. You're right. I mean, it's Navy SEALs. It's that SEAL mentality. It's that kind of like facing an unstoppable force with another unstoppable force, which is the United States military, basically. So yeah, that's a huge portion of the movie as well. I mean, that's super similar. Yeah.
Right. So it's just interesting that, you know, he went from doing Aliens to kind of going back to the original, you know, Ridley Scott kind of influences for this one.
He loves, like James has very much made it a point to say that he loves scaring people. Like it's one of his favorite things. Like he loves creeping them out. He loves scaring them. He loves using gore as a way to just disgust people. So it's very interesting that the way he chooses to do that, and that's a skill too. I mean, making something scare you is a very significant skill. Obviously, a lot of people have been used jump scares in the past few years as a tool for that, but it's much. If you're a horror director, you're talented. Like if you're making good horror shit, you're good at it.
Right.
But yeah, for me, I kind of want to jump this conversation into talking about his influence on effects. Because I mean, obviously Lucas has a lot, Spielberg has a lot, but James Cameron also brings in a portion of it. Right. Specifically with T2, but also his other movies. Like James Cameron is obsessed with technology, and he's obsessed with using that technology to tell further stories and to kind of blow people's minds. But he said that this is what got him on that train. This movie, the creation of this movie, to create certain effects that were never seen before. What do you feel like his influence is on what we're seeing now in 2018? I mean, we still see a lot of what James Cameron started.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, we talk about the liquid effects, like of course, you talk about Terminator 2 being the one that kind of brought that more into the mainstream. But it's still like, I mean, we still see those kind of effects being used today. The CG, morphing a human into a CGI kind of into a CGI kind of character. That was kind of revolutionary for his time as well. And we see a lot of those kinds of things done in X-Men movies, for example, right, with Mystique. So definitely he has influence on that front. Because he was so gung-ho on making sure that the technology worked to suit his vision. I feel like, a lot of directors don't have that opportunity to do that. A lot of directors don't have the budget or the fight to like make, kind of encourage this push of visual effects. But he managed to do it in such a cool and interesting way. I mean, when you really watch Terminator 2, that liquid metal effect only really happens a few times, but it's used very efficiently, you know what I mean, and it's very concise, and there's a very clear vision of what they're going to do on set and how they transported that onto the digital platforms. And then of course when we talk about his later films, particularly something like Avatar, I mean that's the biggest like breakthrough in technology when it comes to like the motion capture, the performance capture technology, 3D. The 3D, the CGI environments. Yeah, so all of that plays a big influence into what he does.
And
his movies.
And he's passionate about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that he keeps tinkering with technology and making things slightly better and easier and more accessible, but also making things, adding another layer to the cinematic experience and making it further distinct from any other form or media out there. So.
Absolutely, and it's crazy because it's one of those things too that a lot of directors nowadays, a lot of filmmakers want to kind of regress. I wouldn't call it regress, but kind of go back to the good old days, go back to the classic film type, and use like more practical effects and more practical things in film, and give it a more timeless 70s 80s vibe. And directors like Lucas, directors like Cameron kind of want to go as far as you can and push technology as far as you can in the digital platform too. So it's interesting to see how digital has gotten such a negative response. And in a way it's earned because a lot of stuff was too digital. But in a way it's like, man, we just saw the most CGI movie ever with Avengers Infinity War.
Yeah.
and people love that movie. And it's crazy how it's like practical effects. You love this movie and it's the most CGI movie ever.
People love the Jungle Book. That shit was like all a computer.
Yeah. So it's interesting where like when it comes to like fans' reactions and critics responding to the digital atmosphere. And it's so funny because I've been doing like a Star Wars deep dive on my personal end, and reading reviews of the first Star Wars. That was like the biggest takeaway from people. They were like, "This is about a weird wizard, but man, then that lightsaber fight, or man, that chase scene with the Falcon is crazy. Like, you got to see this movie because of the effects, kind of thing." And that kind of was what Avatar was too, and eventually we'll get to that, because I remember people were telling me, it's like, dude, just go watch it to see the crazy shit that you're going to see in 3D, or you're going to see the crazy effects that you're going to see, because they created this whole CGI world. Like, a lot of people were like telling me to go watch it just because of that. That was like literally, my brother saw it opening night, and I didn't see it opening night, and that's what he told me. He's like, just watch it for the effects. I was like, all right, but yeah, that leads into our conversation from Terminator 2. Now, I want to talk to you, first of all, obviously, this is a great conversation about sequels, but I want to talk to you about your experience with this movie, because I'm assuming you didn't see it, like, in the 90s.
No.
When you were 2 or 3.
No, but I mean, I probably saw it pretty early on, like when I was like 7, 8, something like that.
Okay.
I mean, like I talked about my grandmother being a big action fan. She also really enjoyed Arnold Schwarzenegger, so this was definitely one that I saw, but like the first time I like watched it proper, and I guess like fully understood what I was watching, I was really blown away by this movie, man. I mean, like even just the whole opening act, like the whole thing of like the Terminator coming back, and like you don't know if he's good or bad, or the scene where they're chasing. What's the I always forget the guy, John Connor. No, John Connor.
Oh, John Connor.
Yeah, when they're chasing him around in the mall, and then Arnold pulls out the giant rifle out of the box of roses. Yeah. And I don't know, man, that's just so badass. And it's like you see like the character turn, you know what I mean? Like right in that moment, and you start to understand and feel him more, and then the movie almost becomes like an Iron Giant. Well, I guess the Iron Giant took from Terminator 2, but like that kind of story, right? Like the man and the machine working together. So it's really
the boy, basically.
The boy.
It's softening up the machine.
Yeah, right. How childhood innocence can bring a whole new layer of thinking to machines that they probably wouldn't have through, I guess, internet culture and stuff like that they'll end up absorbing. But yeah, it's just so fascinating how this. How we see a character change and development through an animatronic, not animatronic actor, but like an animated, character through something like the T800. It's the T800, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's just super dope.
And especially following the original, right? I mean, to me, that's like you just said about Aliens. This movie does the same. If anything, it does it better, in my opinion, because it takes that, like you said, your connection to the T-800, and you're like, oh shit, the evil guy's back, and it's like, no, it turns out he's the good guy, and he's trying to stop this, and it turns out you can kind of cheer for the killer robot if he's on the different side of the team. Right. So it's following up the original and the ideas and the feelings that the original gave you, and kind of making you turn it on its head and make you feel different things too. So it's very interested in that effect too. Obviously, I'm going to talk a lot about the T-1000 in this movie because previously I said Titanic was my first experience. I misspoke. It's T2, and as a kid, this movie, as a child, watching this movie, my biggest takeaway was the T-1000. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Liquid metal. I would call him Liquid Metal Man all the time. And it's one of those things where how do you destroy a machine that can just reconstruct itself in a liquid phase? Like, you can't shoot it. It can shapeshift. It can take form. Like, I thought it was a cool, like, the fact that it can make like little blades with its hand. Like, I still take that aesthetic and use that with my further creativity as a kid. Because as a kid, I was obsessed with Carnage in the Spider-Man the animated series. It's Carnage was the same. He would make like an axe out of his hand. He would make a sword out of his hand. He would make like a ball spike out of, like, he would make different weapons as an extension of his body, almost like in a liquid form. That aesthetic, that feel was like an obsession of mine. I was obsessed with that, and I would create characters, and I created and draw characters and wrote characters that had that same power set. That power set to me was the coolest thing ever. I love the idea of like having, and I still love it, like, it's weird, but I still love it. The idea of having someone getting a shoot off with you, and you're standing there like this, and you can just be like, and have a spike just stab him in the heart and then bring it back. Like, that to me, that aesthetic of having extensions in your arms and forms that you can manipulate, the coolest thing ever. And I'm nerding out so hard, and I'm sorry, guys. But it really impacted me. Like, I still take it with me. And I made comic book characters, like original comic book characters, when I was like 12, based on that power set. That's how much I loved it.
right. I mean, it's different. It's definitely a new thing, a new layer to bring to that. And I think it's also, I mean, commentary on the evolution of technology, right? How the newer technology is a lot more sleeker, a lot more has a lot more fluidity, and has more features that can also, again, come to the behest of our society. Right?
But also be used as a weapon.
Used as weapons too,
and as a defense tool against people trying to destroy that too.
Right.
It's like, oh no, I found a way. I evolved so much in a way that not only do I know a better way to kill you, I know a better way to defend myself from you killing me. That's even creepier, right? It's the concept of hacking a computer and the computer hacking you back. Right. You're like, no, this is crazy, because I'm trying to kill you, and you already learned how to kill me. So that is an interesting portion itself too.
I also think it's fascinating that this movie kind of avoids the usage of guns and killing and those kinds of ways, in terms of kind of walks back what the original Terminator did in terms of being like this hyper-violent thing. This one's much more of like, hey, violence is not cool, man. Don't use violence. And
that's like the rule that John Connor gives him. Yeah.
Right.
No killing.
No killing. Yeah, right from the beginning. So it's a lot less bloodshed in this one than this compared to the first one, but it's a lot more of a struggle of survival, right? It's a much stronger survival story, and that's where you see Linda Hamilton's character Sarah Connor come into the play, right? She's been locked up for a super long time, declared mentally insane because she claims to have seen robots from the future, which actually happened to her, but tell it to anybody else, you're gonna sound crazy, right? So it's just fascinating commentary on how that kind of prison system, or that kind of institutionalization kind of breaks her down and makes her become this like hyper strong and masculine kind of woman and mother who's just trying to survive and see her son. So
yeah, it comes back to motherhood, man. It's almost like James Cameron has a thing for it.
I don't know.
I mean, we see that in Avatar too. It's definitely one of those things that he what can turn a woman, a mild-mannered, soft-spoken, regular, waitress, into a robot-killing machine that Sarah Connor turns into. It's one of those questions that it's like, well, if it's inspiration or if it's determination to protect your son, then she's going to do whatever it takes, even turn into a weapon herself. So it's a very interesting point when it comes to that too. And it's also like the use of children too, which is always interesting because it's a hit or miss kind of thing. But you use the child to spark the innocence, but also make the audience respond so much more to the tension, because you just don't want the kid to die. Obviously, first of all, because he's John Connor, and second of all, because he's a kid. Because you feel bad. So when he's obviously being chased the whole movie, because it's a chase movie essentially, it's one of those things where you're like, you cheer even harder because you're not just cheering for one robot to escape another. You're cheering for that robot to protect. It's the concept of being reprogrammed to not kill but protect, which is very interesting too. And it also comes back to the parentage, because it essentially becomes parents for John Connor. Is the T-800. He becomes a parent because a parent's first job with a child is to protect the child.
Absolutely, and that's kind of the development that we see throughout this movie for Sarah Connor and of herself, right? Because not being able to interact with her own son, like, kind of leaves this level of detachment for both him and her. Like for John Connor, he feels betrayed and left behind. Throughout the beginning of the entire movie, he's rebellious. He's running away from his adopted parents, and he's just responding negatively to everything. But as he starts to build a maternal relationship with Sarah Connor, she starts to understand. He starts to understand what she is going through, and build up that love and appreciation the same way that he's building a love and appreciation for the T-800 itself. Not necessarily as as a father figure, but as that male role model in his life, which is weird because he's being raised by a robot essentially. at least in this section of time in this movie, he befriends a robot, I should say, at least. But it's just fascinating that becomes like his almost new kind of adoptive family. Not new adoptive family. I mean, that's his biological mother, but after his adoptive parents are killed, he has his original family, which is almost another fascinating, metaphor in and of itself, where the first movie had the human come back and save the world. The second one had the robot, the older generation robot. How John Connor and the Michael Biehn character in the first movie, I can't remember his name either.
Kyle Reese.
How Kyle Reese kind of fills in, how the Terminator kind of fills in the role for Kyle Reese in this one, so it's cool.
Yeah, it goes both ways, right? Because
Yeah.
Kyle Reese is his actual dad,
Right.
and he came back in time, but now someone who came back in time is representing his dad.
Right.
I think the biggest thing from this movie too is this actor is like everywhere, but the science aspect of this movie is super interesting.
Oh, right. The doctor,
The actions of the first Terminator led to the destruction of what he was initially, going for.
Right.
So it's one of those things where going back in time actually sparked the destruction of the world.
Right.
Because of the technology and the use of that technology and learning from future technology and how future technology inspired current technology, which is actually a funny little theory that a lot of people have when it comes to the pyramids and shit like that, where it's like, how did we get that kind of technology in this era? It must be, future aliens or some shit. Right. There's a lot of conspiracy theories about that. It's a fun little thing when it comes to technology of the time being so superior to anything we've ever seen. It must be someone from the future went to the past and gave it to us.
And I think that's funny in the sense that we it's that whole cause and effect theory, and when it comes to time travel, right? How the time travel paradox, where you go back, causing an event in the past, leading to the events in the future that influence the events in the past, right? It's like a nonstop. What came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting kind of question that's brought up here, and the consequences of the doctor. I can never forget the doctor's name.
Miles Dyson.
Played
by Joe Morton.
And he was in Justice League too, right?
Yeah, he's in everything. That guy's like ageless, man.
Yeah.
That movie was like, what, 91, 92?
Yeah, man.
So he's been in a lot of movies.
I think it's dope that they cast him in Justice League as the father for Cyborg.
That's a good one. You're right.
That's nice. But yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, they used that whole paradox as the kind of baseline for this movie, and ultimately resulting in what the later films will ultimately come to. And
it's also a question as far as like, is time written kind of thing, right? Where it's like the T-800, Arnold's character wants to kill him because of the actions he commits, he's going to commit, and not the actions he's committed already in his life. It comes back to the whole, Minority Report type thing, where it's like a crime I haven't committed yet, and being judged for that, or a potential crime that I can possibly do. So it's interesting as far as like changing a future which you feel like it's determined, but it's not determined, kind of thing. Which is the big theme in obviously all the Terminator movies. Is the apocalypse inevitable? Is Skynet going to take over the world regardless of the actions we take now? Mr. RB3.
I mean,
but it's a bigger philosophical question, right? Because we're looking at stuff like the environment right now, and we're determining it's like, well, if we take action, it's like a lot of scientists say it's regardless of any actions we take. Or when it comes to the government right now, when it comes to, you see what I'm saying? Like every decision we make now can affect the future, or maybe it won't affect the future. Maybe the future is inevitable.
I mean, that's a compelling point. I mean, it just depends on like what you choose to believe, right? If you think that, if you believe in destiny, if you believe that things are going to happen no matter which way our actions take us, or you're going to...
But wouldn't that create apathy, though? Do you think that creates apathy within society? The fact that we're like, if we kind of give up on our future kids and generations from now, because they're not born yet. That's a lot of, especially Americans, but that's a lot of people who were like, what kids? I'm just living for me. And that's the mentality of like, what about the future kids? What about your future generations? Kind of thing. Well, the apathy that it creates.
Well, that's a big part of it too. But then there's also the people who believe in personal choice too, right? Who believe that personal choice is like what your choices are influence your future instead of like your future already being written. I mean, that's kind of the whole argument there too, right? So, I guess it just really depends on what side of the fence.
What about I'm talking about philosophical stuff now, but whatever. What about the concept of science? What about the concept of intelligence? What about the people who choose to ignore something that's scientifically accepted? And there's a lot of people.
A lot of politicians that are denying like actual science.
But I feel like those politicians, this is my opinion, are denying it because they know that their supporters deny it. That's why.
I don't think it's their supporters. I think it's their money. So their money supporters.
Okay.
They're the big oil is in particular is something that's like, hey, if you shut up about doing this green energy stuff, we'll give you a little more money on the back end because that's how their business is going to sustain, right? If all of the technology and all of our environmental work started implementing regulations to these oil companies, that's going to cost them money. That's going to cost them staff, supply, all that kind of stuff. If we started developing technology in terms of green technology, in terms of solar panels, windmills, and all these alternative forms of energy, then of course the oil companies are gonna be out of luck because a lot of people are gonna see that their energy bills are getting a lot lower, and they can start converting to like electric vehicles, which is gonna totally kill gasoline. So stuff like that, I think, is the biggest reason why a lot of politicians are just turning the other way. But I feel like a lot of common people don't understand the science either because they're not being educated enough for it, and that's where I think that's why, because it's not up for debate. Like it's not like global warming is real. 97% of certified. I think it was something like 94 to 97% of certifiable scientists, have peer reviewed each other's work when it comes to this. Climate change issue, and all of them pretty much agree. And the ones that don't agree are usually the ones who are funded and researched by the big oil corporations. So
yes, I was literally about to say that when it comes down to education, right? I think education to me is the most important thing that a society can have, because education can lead to informed decisions, which I feel like sometimes they don't have. They make decisions, but they're misinformed,
right,
or they're mistaken, and that can bring danger into society. I feel like that's what's going on now, personally. But at the same time, if I'm playing the devil's advocate, I can say to you, that's a fair point, but what about the jobs you're going to cost the people who work at these oil companies? What about the jobs you're going to cost us right now in order to stop something that is a potential future for other people's jobs, right?
Well, yeah.
And also I can counter that by saying it may be happening, but the big debate now going on, I feel personally, is not necessarily is it real, is can humanity do anything about it, kind of thing.
Well,
should we spend billions of dollars doing all this stuff for, like, goes back to the Terminator conversation for anyone who tuned out, to stop a future that's inevitable? You see what I'm saying?
Right. I mean, I mean, humans have to be held accountable for our actions that we're committing on this planet, right? I mean, this is, it's not just a thing that's just happening, randomly. When you look, I mean, the Earth has existed through billions of years. Why are we reaching this point of losing what the planet is, just in this short period of time that humans have been existent? Not even that maybe a few thousand years, like 10,000, 20,000 years or whatever that humans have existed on this Earth, as compared to the billions and billions of years this Earth has existed previously. The factor here is humans, and the factor is that we are destroying the planet, and that we have to look at the ways that we could fix it. And when you talk about those jobs, I mean, the jobs are important. I feel like that's why we have to start converting to clean energy jobs, right? Because and I think you're going to create more jobs and higher paying jobs and more, jobs that require more education, to fill in those roles, which is good because, for one, it boosts green energy, it boosts, clean environmental stuff. It also boosts, like I said, education, right? If companies started apprenticeship programs for people coming in and working for these places, that it'll lead to a lot more. It'll lead to a lot more work, and there, we shut down an oil plant and have solar plants throughout, solar or hydrogen or windmills. You definitely create a lot more spread out jobs that way. So
yeah, I mean, obviously it's a whole different conversation as well. But I also feel like this movie brings up the conversation of technology, right? And it also brings up the conversation of responsibility, generational responsibility, where it's like, what does a generation choose to do with a certain technology that is just taking off, right? And obviously that comes from Dr. Dyson in this movie. When it comes to the certain technology that's being developed, it's very interesting. And I know I'm going to bring up another real world thing, but I feel like it connects. It's funny. I saw a report, I think about a month ago, talking about China. Like, I don't know if you know this, but China is currently developing a technology that can literally have cameras everywhere, and cameras that will. So the big example that the report used was China has a huge problem with jaywalking, and jaywalking is illegal. But now with this new camera identification system, they can see the person, scan the person's face, do a facial recognition, see where they live, see what their job is, see everything else, and then send them the fine through the mail. Wow. By the way, we caught you jaywalking at 2:22 p.m. Here's a photo. Have a good one. Pay the $300 fine. Wow. Like, that is the creepiest thing ever. But the government of China is using that as a way to determine good behavior. So this report was very funny because I forget what outlet covered it, but an outlet covered it and said, are we going to live in a Black Mirror world where apparently if you keep doing that and if you keep breaking the law, you get a score, and your score starts to get lower and lower.
Yeah, I heard about the score thing, yeah.
That it goes with that. So it goes where, like, you commit a crime, you toss trash, not in the trash can, you do something that can mess up your score. And that score-based system is going to determine certain things that you're allowed to use. The train, the bus, basic human things. The airports, stuff that you want to use in order to live your life, you're going to be getting, if you have a low enough score, you're going to be determined that. Funny enough, the biggest company in China that's doing it, you know what their name is?
What's that?
Skynet.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay.
And it's so funny because they said, oh yeah, we chose that name because we thought it was going to be funny and cool because we're going to be the positive version of Skynet. And I'm like, bro, you ain't no positive version.
You're definitely implementing what Skynet wants.
But if China's very different than the United States because it has a different type of government, but at the same time, I can see that happening in maybe 50, 40 years or something. I can, maybe 50 years, I'll put it. But it's one of those things where a movie by James Cameron can inspire a company to take that idea and say, like, it looked bad in the movie, but we can make it good though, right?
Still make it equally shitty. Yeah.
So it's an interesting point of as far as how technology, we have the technology to facially recognize these people and to track everyone and to make companies require them. If you're going to work here, you have to sign up with a system or something like that, right? That can be the way to do it. And that's the danger of technology that they're facing in this movie, which is what Skynet is doing to make these Terminators, basically.
Right.
So that's a big theme. I don't know if you take that as much as I take from
that.
No,
that's big. Yeah, I mean, you're breaking news to me, bro. With this
yeah, I'll talk to you about it afterwards too. I'll show you the articles and the reports. But it's creepy as F. I think they said 2020 is like their official, 2019 or 2020, that they're officially going to make that like a China-wide.
Yeah, that's
all over China. Because they're doing it right now in certain districts, but they're going to make it all over China, which is like, China's like the biggest country in the world. So it's like, yikes.
That's wild. Yeah. I mean surveillance. I mean that's a big thing that we're dealing with in the U.S. too, right?
True.
I think that's a big theme in his next movie, which is True Lies.
True Lies. Let's get into it. Starring Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Jamie Lee Curtis. This is probably the only like true action movie that James Cameron has ever made.
I would agree with that.
Straight up action film, right? I mean, this one is more about it's kind of the same setup as Mr. and Mrs. Smith, right? Like the husband and wife, they're both spies, and they both have like these undercover operations to if one is cheating on the other and all this kind of stuff. It's just super fascinating and weird and crazy. But I really dig this movie, man. This one is much more of a fluff piece, I feel like, but it's so awesome. It's so weird. Like,
you think it holds up?
I think it holds up. Yeah, I really enjoy it. I love the scene when Jamie Lee Curtis is like doing the whole dance show in front of Arnold.
Jesus, Jamie Lee Curtis, man.
Yeah. I mean, she was looking good back then.
She's looking good now, bro.
Oh yeah, still do.
Also, I was going to go back to the Piranha. What I said about Sigourney Weaver. Sigourney Weaver, though.
Jamie Lee Curtis. But yeah, this one. I also really love the scene, and this is a really silly scene, but I think like a lot of comedies actually like took from this moment, like when Arnold is driving with the dude in the car, and he's like, oh yeah, I was banging this totally hot chick, and like of course he's talking about like Arnold's wife, and like you just go to like the whole like the whole thing where like Arnold punches him in the nose and he's like bleeding out and all this stuff. And it's just like a dream, and it just cuts back. It's just like them normally driving. It's like a dream sequence. I don't know if you know what the scene I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know exactly. What you're talking about.
I don't know. To me, that's like,
what he wants to do, but he's not doing it.
Yeah. It's just super funny to me. I don't know if I'm sure other movies that did that before that.
There's a lot.
Yeah. But I don't know. For me, that movie like really like hit like landed that for me like really hard. But this movie is funny and brilliant, so I really appreciate it.
What do you think about the biggest criticism of this movie? Not the biggest one, but the depiction of the terrorists and the depiction of foreign terrorists.
Oh, right.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean that's always going to be a problem. It's always problematic when we talk about.
And the timing when this movie came out too is very interesting because it came out in 94, so it's a kind of. Because in 97, I believe, or 90, like 96, 97, I forget when Osama bin Laden's first terrorist attack was. I think it was 97 or something around that time. Late 90s is when he was starting to pick up some steam in the Middle East.
Right. I mean, that's when it stopped being funny. I mean, at that point. But I mean, it wasn't funny to begin with, and those depictions of these foreign terrorists is like very hard, very awful and hateful and stuff like that. But I mean, I guess that's the story they want to tell during that time. I mean, during the 80s and 90s.
And it works, right?
All of them. Yeah, I mean, that was all of the movies. If it wasn't like Middle Eastern peoples, it was Russians and stuff like that. So
it's an interesting question, right? When it comes to creating terrorists and creating villains in movies and making them foreigners and choosing what country. For many years, it's been Russians.
Mm-hmm.
Russian spy, Russian agent. There's a ton of movies that make Russian bad guys. Like Russian bad guys is almost like it's almost like a term now. Like people know what that is.
Cliche.
It's a cliche. That's a perfect example. So Russian bad guy is an example. So it's interesting to see the development of now going into the Middle Eastern bad guys. And I know Arnold did a movie. I forget the name of the movie, but it was Colombian drug lord bad guys or Colombian military bad guys, which is funny because I'm Colombian. And it's something that we take kind of personally. Not necessarily. The reason why, and also talking about other movies, I've talked to you very openly, and I've talked about this podcast about Breaking Bad, making drug cartels, all Mexican. Like even the movie that's coming out, or that came out, Superfly. Yeah, and it's like this cool, hip hop gangsters versus Mexican cartel. Like it's always the Mexican cartel to the point where it's like, oh my God, we get it. We're evil. But it's one of those things where
you're not evil.
Yeah, I know. But what I'm saying is like, after a while, because I watch a lot of shows that has that, and I'm cool with it. And Breaking Bad's a great show. But it's one of those things where after a while, you're like, can we do something else? Can Latinos do something else? Or are we just gonna cut people's heads off? You know what I'm saying? Like, is that really gonna be a depiction for movies in the past 20 years? Like, it's been that way for a while. So it's interesting to pick foreign villainers, and you always try to make it. I don't feel like they're necessarily coming from a bad place, the directors that do this stuff. But it's a very interesting point when it comes to always depicting people that way. Or constantly. Or seeing it in the media and seeing it covered by certain news cycles and then seeing it in movies and fiction. It's almost like a reassert this feeling. To put that feeling inside Americans, to feel that certain way. Because when it comes from the media, and it comes from your fiction and your popcorn fun movies, it starts to kind of depict your
lines,
your depiction on what you feel towards these foreigners, basically. And it's funny because I recently saw the movie. I've never seen it before, but I was like, screw it, I'll watch it. What was the one with Aaron Eckhart, White House Down?
Yeah, White House Down, yeah. Wait, Aaron Eckhart, no, I'm sorry, that's the one.
Olympus Is Falling.
Olympus Is Falling, yeah.
And it's Koreans.
Yeah.
It's North Koreans.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was such a weird. I was like, yo, the North Koreans.
Well, now they're the new enemy, right? Because they're the bad guys in the remake of
Red Dawn.
Red Dawn.
You're right. That's right. I think that's the first one that did that too. The remake, I think it was like 2007. The remake or 08?
It was like 2011. 12,
oh, okay.
Like that,
yeah, but that's a good point.
Yeah. And I mean that's just the way I feel like the climate is going to. They just follow what's the new. And I think Russian villains are going to be coming back. I'm sure enough.
Oh yeah, they're already coming back.
But in the movies,
I've been watching TV and they're making a comeback, man.
Yeah.
Give Russians jobs or Americans that do Russian accents.
Right. They're really.
I just saw Atomic Blonde too.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, for the time period.
Sure.
Yeah. It's fun. I hope we chill on the North Korea stuff because, like, I
hope we chill on the Russian stuff.
Yeah. We have to chill on the Russian because you already know where I stand on that.
Because I personally I like Russian people, man. I love Russians. Russians are awesome. And now we're in Russia for the 2018 World Cup. I really do feel like, there's a lot of effed up stuff that's going on in the high levels of the government. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Icarus. A massive fan of Icarus, and that really tore the curtain open with what's going on at the high levels, and how another report for ESPN, how they got the World Cup, like that makes no sense, and how they got the Olympics obviously to be there too, but how, it's not a coincidence, guys. Let's just say that, how it's Russia 2018 World Cup. But at the same time, I love Russians, and I really do feel like, if anything, now we should stop depicting them as villains. Now more than ever.
Yeah.
Like, let's bring us together, not make us more apart.
Right.
That's just how I feel personally.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big part of it too. I mean,
we just said chill on the North Koreans.
We have chill on North Korea. I mean, we're getting close to. It looks like we're getting close to a peace deal. Maybe, hopefully. I mean, I hope that works out.
I don't know, man. I'm so pessimistic.
Pessimistic.
Oh,
I'm hoping Trump just don't fuck this up, man.
At the same time, it's difficult for me to. I don't know. I have too many opinions. I'm not gonna get into it, guys. But one thing I will say too is that. Speaking of Korea played yesterday in the World Cup versus Sweden, and I just thought it was interesting, and I know this is such a weird thing to say, but I believe this is the first time that South Korea just said Korea Republic on the logo when it says Sweden versus Korea Republic, and I might be mistaken, and you guys will probably correct me, but in past World Cups it's always been South Korea versus Panama, South Korea versus Brazil. And now it was Korea Republic. And I was like, that's interesting that they're trying to push that narrative of not North and South, but like we're a one Korea kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm hoping we could get the people who are in North Korea out, and mingling with the South Koreans, and so we can have a fully functioning society in that country again. You know what I mean? Like, I hate to see the people of North Korea being subjected to this horrible dictator. So I'm hoping that's why a peace deal is worked out between the U.S. and South Korea and North Korea. And I think sometime down the future that'll happen. But back to True Lies, I guess.
I was gonna say. I mean, what do you? Is this movie? Is it too silly? Is it too over the top, or do you feel like it still has like some sort of realism towards it?
No, I mean, no, it's not really any realism. I mean, at the end they're standing on planes. Like,
I was gonna say that the most iconic scene in this movie is that plane missile scene. What is his line? I forget his line.
Oh, I can't.
He has like a classic line.
Yeah.
I mean, shout out to James Cameron for making a dumb action movie. Let's move on to Titanic, because that's probably one of the biggest ones.
Yeah.
So Titanic. Once again, coming from the TED Talk, when James Cameron wanted to make this movie, apparently, this is coming from him, he said the only reason he wanted to make this movie was so he can personally see the Titanic wreckage.
Really?
And everyone got like a big laugh on the TED Talk, but he's like, I pitched it to the studio and I was like, I'm going to make this crazy romance, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be crazy. It's about the Titanic and it's a love story. Everyone's going to love it. But at the same time, he said, "But I gotta physically be there, man. I gotta physically see the Titanic wreckage in order to make an accurate prediction of the movie." Like he started talking about it because this stemmed from his curiosity into the actual Titanic wreckage. Like he still is nowadays. He even made a documentary about it, like finding the truth of Titanic. Like he's obsessed with that because he finds it to be so weird that this iceberg just took out the giant ship. But at the same time, that's how he pitched it. So he investigated it and would go underwater, and this came back with his original background, which was scuba dive, deep sea scuba diving, which was his actual background. That's what he studied. And that's why he made the movie, which I think is kind of funny, because eventually what we got was the biggest movie of all time, basically, is what Titanic is. Obviously, Avatar is bigger, but it's one of those things where, like I said before, Avatar has the help of 3D. This movie did it. So, now that this movie died down from all the hype, now that it's years later...
Multiple Academy Awards,
yeah. Like just a crazy hype. Obviously, it's been years. What is your connection to this movie, first of all? And what is your takeaway from this movie? Is it still like a really good movie, or is it overhyped? What do you think?
Right. I mean, like, I've never saw it as like... Well, I mean, it's definitely a classic in the sense that it is this thing that like took over the cultural wave, right? I mean, I wasn't part of that cultural wave. So, okay, so you were. So so there were a lot. I mean, I'm sure there were
I was a little kid, but I still remember it.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't there for that. So, like, I don't know what that wave was at that time. But, I mean, you can still see the influence that it has on today's filmmaking, right? The epic romance kind of movies that, kind of eggs back to, like, the old Hollywood kind of sensibilities. Like, oh, this classic romance tales and these classic boats and yachts and all this stuff. But this is like more postmodern version of that, where we see like the deconstruction aspect of it, right? Where like that romance is like literally split apart as the boat is, So I mean, it's cool. I mean, but like I like it a lot. I mean, I think it's a great movie. I rewatch it probably like once every couple years or something. But I just don't know if it's the best picture winner of
of that year.
Was it 1999?
I think 7.
1997? Okay. I guess 1997. I don't know what else came out that year. So it's the year I was born. That's the year I came out. Hey. 21, baby.
Man, that's
21
crazy.
years ago.
21, man.
Yeah.
That's crazy. You're a child, man.
I'm still a child.
Yep. No, I also want to talk about, obviously this is the meaning of, I want to talk about there's a lot of concepts that James Cameron brings up in this movie, specifically immigration and foreigners, another concept of foreigners that we get, but it comes from obviously it's more about class than anything else.
Yeah.
But it stems from that. What do you think that the bigger themes are in this movie, whether it comes to class, whether it comes to different people from different backgrounds, immigration, high society, the rich get fatter while the poor starve kind of feel?
Right.
That's the bigger theme within the movie.
Right. I mean that's what I totally took from it the most was the class, the wealth disparagement, like how this kid who is played by Leonardo DiCaprio has no money, he just won this free trip on a boat from a card game and ends up seeing the world with all these rich and fancy people. How much of a culture shock that is to him and how much he has to adapt to that. And how, and I always think it's fascinating too when you look at it from the her perspective, right? From the Kate Winslet side, who's this super rich girl who's super fascinated of what it's like to be poor and live on your own and be adventurous and not be spoiled and pampered and kind of be taken around, So it's just it's a weird dichotomy that this movie deals with, and it's a relationship to both the wealthy and the foreign, like you said, the not necessarily the foreigner, but the poor, the lower class people who can't afford trips and extravagant, boat rides on the Titanic. So
yeah, it's a very classic by the numbers type of love story when it comes to like the rich girl falls in love with the young rascal. It's Aladdin.
Right.
I mean,
right.
I mean, we see this in a lot of other movies, right? When it comes to like the rich girl wanting to experience life down below, basically, and then falling in love with someone who she's not allowed to fall in love with.
Right. And it's the whole Romeo and Juliet thing too, right? Except, in Romeo and Juliet, there was opposing gangs, and here it's opposing wealths, right? And how Kate Winslet's character of Rose is kind of split between the Leonardo DiCaprio character and her wealthy fiance, who's like super dick, super abusive, and all that kind of stuff too. So it's just like, did she pick the rich but corrupted and evil, or the poor but satisfying and generous and all that stuff? So
yeah, and it's also, personally, this is my takeaway. I also feel like it connects too with like, how does that, what you just said, deal in a tragedy? Mm-hmm. How do you deal with that situation when you're in a catastrophe, like the Titanic sinking, or a plane going down, or whatever it may be, like some sort of disaster, a storm, a disaster type movie type feel, and within that is like this class system struggle type of thing, because that famous scene of that all the women and children, and then the freaking fiance is like, screw you, I'm going into the women and children boat because I'm a scaredy cat who's like, I gotta keep my money, I gotta be alive. And he doesn't respect the laws of catering towards women and children, and he's like, I'm a man, but screw it, I'm rich, so F you other guys kind of thing. And it's obviously more of a cowardice thing, but it's also an interesting dynamic between male and female, and that kind of gender roles that were kind of determined in that era. Sorry, I lost my voice. But I think that's a big theme in the movie too. It's like, how do you deal with those certain situations and tragedy and tragic moments? And it's one of those things where it's like, when a ship is going down, we're all the same. We're all trying to survive, right? When a plane is going down or something, like, money goes out the window. Like, I don't care about you paying me to do something. Right now, I just want to live. You want to live. He wants to live. They want to live. And it's like everyone is equal in that moment, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think, but even though it's equal, it's supposed to be equal. You do see like the more wealthier people getting on the boats first too, right? They're getting assured their safety, and I think at the end, I mean, it's a bigger commentary on who survives, right? At the end, right? Look at Rose. I mean, she's the rich girl. She's the one who, needs the plane in order to survive. whereas Leo's just stuck in the water being frozen to death. So, you know, you just see like when it's a dog eat dog world, and the rich is always going to eat the poor. So.
I gotta ask you about the meme that's still going on now, guys. About, you know, Jack could have fit.
No, he couldn't fit. Yo,
hashtag Jack could have fit. And there's like a big like battle on social media about it.
He could not fit. He could not fit. Y'all got to stop it, man. They show him trying the movie. Like, what the fuck? Like,
you're not on that train?
No, I'm not on the train, man. They show him try it in the movie and fail. Like, I was gonna say,
this movie gave us a lot. It also gave me personally the whole fear, and I still have this fear, guys, of cold water.
Oh, definitely.
Ever since this movie, you're like, yo, cold water sucks.
Yeah. Yo, see,
I'd rather die by like some weird, you know, someone just shoot me or some creature take me, but I don't want to freeze to death, please, in cold water. That's awful. That's an awful way to die.
Yo, and see, I gotta address, because the Mythbusters did the whole thing, right?
Oh,
they tried to do the whole door. And listen, in the episode they did it. It took them multiple tries to get the position just right, okay? And I don't even know if the door was like perfectly whatever, you know, you can say whatever. They didn't even use real bodies, first of all, and it took multiple. So imagine doing that, and imagine trying to do that in an actual like frozen, where water's literally freezing, and bros has to keep getting in and out of water. They probably would have frozen to death just from being wet and out there in the cold. You know, so it's like, damn. I mean, but hey, listen, he didn't survive. Rose lived and dropped like that very valuable pearl all the way into the ocean.
Hey man, that pearls are hard, bro.
Yeah. Now that's a fascinating framing. This is one of the first times I saw that framing device, right? Of the future. I guess we've seen that framing device before, of like the future telling that story back to the past or to their kids or something like that. But you know, I feel like the more modern approach is more reflective of like what James Cameron's mindset was, right? The whole sense of discovery. I mean, those dudes in the boats are just like, hey, we have to check. You know, the only reason they wanted it is to ask a bunch of questions to get more discovery about the Titanic. So it was just fascinating to me that, you know, when you talk about how he wanted to make this movie to finance his endeavors, it's just fascinating that he's so curious about the Titanic in and of itself.
And that jumps off into my other conversation, which is, this is when James, and obviously watched the TED Talk, like I said before, but he said that this is what sparked he just had a desire, interest into investigate more, you know, deep sea diving discoveries. And he said that he did dozens and dozens of these, to the point where he took it upon himself to put filmmaking aside. He said, I was like, I'm going to put this aside for the moment, and I'm going to go inside my passion, something I've always wanted to do. And from there, he said he did dozens of like missions and stuff.
You're right.
And he learned about it. He learned the science. Like, he actually had teams of groups, like he would do these type of discovery type missions.
Right, and I mean, he eventually ended up making like 3 documentaries that were
he made documentaries about
underwater. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Like, he was obsessed with this, to the point that he made documentaries, and he said like no one saw the documentaries, and everyone said like, I just, you know, decided to stop filmmaking, but that wasn't the case at all. I was just doing the stuff that I really wanted to do.
Right.
But then it leads into his other conversation, which he said that when he was driving the boat. Not the boat, the drone. You know, the underwater drone. And when he was doing it, he said that I would see a screen, and I would be driving the boat, but the drone boat. Well, I don't know what you call it, and I would be going through the wreckage of the Titanic, and I was seeing it through the screen. But as someone who was going through it, I physically felt like I was that drone, like I was physically going through the wreckage, and those little apparatuses were my arms, my hands, my body. And it was a weird mental state that I was in, where I felt like I was physically in the Titanic, even though it was a ship that I was controlling through a screen. And that kind of leads to what he said, which is another concept of avatar, which is being your consciousness is inside this foreign body, this foreign thing, but you're still the one behind it. You're driving the wheel.
Driver, right.
And that leads into Avatar, which is the biggest movie of all time. The number 1 worldwide box office earning movie is Avatar. And he said that he wanted to first of all, make the biggest technological movie. Like, that was his big goal, to make, like, the most ambitious technology-type movie.
Yeah.
And he said that he came up with this idea in the 90s, I think he said?
Yeah, in the 90s. Yeah, he literally wrote this entire script.
That's right.
But he couldn't find a way to produce it because there wasn't...
the technology of the time
wasn't there.
He couldn't do it.
Right. He had the vision of the technology, of the performance capture and all that stuff beforehand, but they just didn't have any of that ready. So he sat on it, locked it away. Of course, I mean, you know, that's what a lot of people talk about now, right? Is a ripoff of Pocahontas. It's a ripoff of Ferngully, Dances with Wolves. You know.
What does your response to that criticism?
Well, I mean, when he talks about writing in the 90s, it's like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. He wrote it like before or during that time period. That's why it belongs in that time and space. That being said, I mean, all movies are kind of unoriginal to some extent. You know, I always feel like, I think, and even though this movie's not the most original movie, I appreciate the execution. I feel like that, we tell the same stories over and over again all the time, but it just really comes down to how they're executed and how they're directed. And this one is a technological pioneer that I'm always going to appreciate.
Yeah, you love this movie, right?
Yeah. I mean, unabashedly so. I mean, of course, I get that it's not like the most original or whatever, but at the same time, it still is breaking ground in so many different ways, from a filmmaking standpoint to having a very strong pro-environmental message, which we kind of talked about how it kind of flips the environmental thing in Aliens and kind of flips it on its head, kind of takes it from the other perspective. And I appreciate that is the approach that he takes to this, because I'm sure being underwater for so long, he's kind of developed like an empathy or to some extent like an understanding of non-human beings, or non-human species and environments, So he probably is more empathetic towards the environment and deforestation and all those big themes. So I appreciate that being tackled head on. So I really enjoy Avatar.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I feel like that's such a it's a fair criticism, because it is a not ripoff. I call it a retelling. I think it's a retelling. It's the same core story with a different skin on it, with a different boat, I guess you can say. It's a different type of retelling of a classic story. Why is that a bad thing?
Right.
Personally, I feel like that's very interesting, and it's a different way to tell generations the same story. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think you can be creative in the sense of how you tell that story, but choose that story itself. I mean, that to me is there's so much stuff that's not original. That it's like, it's fine, guys, it's okay. Right. I feel like that's the biggest criticism of this movie, and it's like, criticize other things, man. Like, that gets old after a while.
Right. I mean, that criticism's always going to come up, right? I mean, that's the Force Awakens whole thing.
Yeah.
For me personally, I mean, a lot of people don't like. I mean, a lot of people love Baby Driver, but to me, that movie felt like totally unoriginal. But I think that's more of a case of people not seeing the original movies that is taking
that's
from.
That's my point. Though. My point is, a lot of people won't see the. I just blanked. What was it?
Like Dancing with Wolves.
Dances with Wolves.
Because I'll tell you,
was it Gone with the Wind?
Yeah, Pocahontas. Ferngully, all that stuff. And I'll tell you this, Ace.
People won't see that. Like, kids won't see that, but they could probably see Avatar.
You know what? I'll tell you this, Ace. I remember seeing Avatar in the theaters. I didn't have that criticism when I first saw it because I hadn't watched Dances with Wolves.
That's my point. A lot of people don't realize that you're introducing properties to different kids, or you're introducing stories to different kids. I talked about this with Scott Mann's Star Trek. Me, zero connection to Star Trek. I mean, zero. Star Wars, yeah, of course, I have connection to it. My introduction to Star Trek was 2009's J.J. Abrams' Star Trek reboot. And people hate that movie, and the Trekkies hate it. Yeah. It got me into Star Trek. It made me want to check out the originals. It worked. Like, it got me into like, yo, Spock is really cool. This world, the Starfleet, all that stuff's cool. This is me watching the 2009 reboot. Mm-hmm. It inspired me personally to go back and to see this world of Star Trek. Right. So I feel like it's people criticize certain things, but it's like you're introducing stuff to new generations. The same story, different skin, new generation. Like, I think that's a powerful thing to do with the Avatar story.
Right. And you know, again, to me, I just really appreciate that they went for an environmental message. I like the whole idea of taking it back. Even, you know, like I said, the aliens thing. And even look, they even went as far as to cast Sigourney Weaver as like the head.
Shout out to Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah, right. Back in this one as the person who is hoping to help the Na'vi and all that stuff. So I mean, I appreciate this movie on so many levels. I appreciate the visual effects, of course.
I was going to ask you about that. When it comes to visual effects, this is one of the most influential movies. Obviously, performance capture, but visual effects in general and creating other worlds. What do you feel like the creation of this movie did for what we see now?
Right, I mean, this totally influenced like everything, right? I mean the CGI environments.
I just said Infinity War.
Right, Infinity War. Infinity War is like literally all Avatar. CGI people.
Infinity War is Avatar, basically.
Yeah, essentially, and then but it's dope, and I think Avatar is really dope too. You know, a lot of people say the visual effects don't really hold up now. I don't agree with that necessarily. I think they still like hold up really, really well. There's that one scene that I always think back to when the giant rhino is like behind Jake and does like that weird like pan and zoom shot. And that's also a piece of technology that became a bigger thing after Avatar was the digital camera. What Avatar really pioneered from a technology standpoint, from a visual effects standpoint, is the ability to have like a live CGI environment on set. So like if you have like a virtual camera around, you could like move the camera and it'll be like moving inside the environment like VR, but like
correct.
Yeah, but like pre-res.
Yeah, and people use that. I mean, Ryan Johnson used that in The Last Jedi.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people have started using. I mean, I remember watching that the behind the scenes for that movie, Monsters vs. Aliens, that little DreamWorks film. But that was the first animated movie to implement that technology, particularly in the scene where the girl is like super giant and she's like rolling through the city and they have like these handheld shots. And Avatar definitely influenced it on that sense. And, you know, we can't, you know, talk about Avatar without addressing the elephant in the room, which is the 3D thing, right? That's probably the biggest wave of filmmaking that's ever swept cinema. So
what is your connection with 3D beforehand? Did you have any? Or was this your first connection with 3D?
No, I mean, like, there was definitely still 3D before Avatar. Like,
no, I know there was. I'm saying you.
Right. I mean, for me, yeah, I remember watching Spy Kids 3D in theaters, weirdly enough. Spy Kids 3D in theaters. But that was still when it was, like, pink and green, like,
sure.
Tilted in, or red and blue or whatever. And then I do remember they started slowly introducing this new thing of the new technology of 3D. I remember the first new one of 3D I saw was that animated Disney film Meet the Robinsons.
Is that the
Disney one with the dinosaur?
Yeah.
It was took place in the future or whatever. Not the best movie, but that was the first one that like I remember them using like the Disney digital 3D was like the first time I remember really seeing that. And then Caroline was another one I saw in 3D. But then when Avatar came out, it just blew everything else out of the water and kind of took over the 3D conversation from that point forward. And you know, there's some people who still to this day think that, you know, Avatar was boosted up and kind of, some people say, destroyed the art of film by the installation of, you know, the digital projectors, right? Having digital projection instead of cellular projection, because when you project a movie in 3D in these modern days, it has to be projected digitally. So a lot of people
also watching movies that are now all converted into 3D, right? Some of them are not, but most at least blockbuster movies have a 3D option or a 3D version. But then, especially with IMAX, which in LA, I've talked about this before, where I struggle with IMAX because everything is now IMAX 3D. There's no such thing almost as IMAX 2D. And someone who's very pure filmmaking snob like me and doesn't watch 3D, you know, makes it difficult to enjoy the IMAX. Obviously, I think there's one or two theaters that don't do IMAX 3D and just IMAX. But now, you know, Amazing Spider-Man 2, or the X-Men movies that were in 3D, I clearly remember this is kind of what started that. That almost every blockbuster is now 3D version.
Right. I mean, people
like all the Marvel movies.
Right. And you know, you don't enjoy 3D. I personally enjoy 3D.
Okay.
I try and see as much 3D
as I can. You have two opinions. Good.
Right. But for I mean, it just depends on the film sometimes,
sure.
right? There are some films that just have no business being in 3D. You know, I'm trying to think. There was a recent blockbuster. I was like, I saw Incredibles 2 in 3D, man.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, you know,
maybe that's why you didn't care for it as much.
Well, maybe that's why. But we're talking off. I didn't even say it on camera. Sorry, guys. I didn't love Incredibles 2.
Dead to me, bro.
But I'm gonna
going back to the bro. I was gonna say going back Elastigirl though, bro.
Oh yeah,
going back to that Piranha poster.
Yeah, yeah.
Come on, dude. Jamie Lee Curtis, Sigourney Weaver. I'm backing on Elastigirl right now.
Nah, but yeah, no. So
I lost all the
our female audience. Sorry,
Ace, evil.
No, but I loved what were we talking about again before?
Incredibles 2.
Oh, Incredibles 2.
Oh, the 3D.
The 3D in it. The 3D wasn't. I think the Pixar movies usually do the best 3D, or animated movies are generally best served in 3D.
You didn't like it?
I didn't really.
I love the action scenes in that movie though.
And Incredibles 2. Yeah, they're cool. They're cool scenes. Yeah. There's definitely.
I thought the subway, the train scene was dope.
Yeah, it was towards the middle, right? Or
yeah. With the motorcycle and the train.
Yeah. It was good stuff. I mean, there's good stuff in there. I feel like we gotta stop doing these meaning of episodes right before I see movies, because then and literally when I spend the entire week jotting down notes and thinking heavy about the Incredibles, and then I go into the Incredibles 2 and watch it. I'm
kind of disappointed.
Yeah.
Oh, never mind. I was gonna ask you about something else. Shout out to Incredibles 2 for making Kristen Stewart a superhero. Kristen Stewart, yeah. Void. Tell me you didn't see Kristen.
Yeah, I totally.
I got a lot of shit for that on Twitter because I said it on Twitter and somebody was like, "No, it's not. It's what's her name? The actress who plays her?
Oh, I don't know. I
forget her name. It's I forget her name. But either way, there's no, it's not Kristen. It's and I'm like, I know. Yeah. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they're basically making Kristen Stewart impression. Right. For that character where she's like, oh my god, I'm such a big fan, and she's brushing her
her comb over,
her comb over. That's literally Kristen Stewart's comb over. Yeah. I don't know if you've seen Kristen Stewart. She has that hairstyle. Shout out to Incredibles 2 for including my homegirl Kristen Stewart. I love you, Kristen. I love you. That's number 4.
Hey, guess what, guys? Not a superhero woman who's silent this time, huh? This is progress for Ace.
There you go.
Yeah.
Hey, man, come on. Tony Wagner, you're still dead to me, bro.
Yeah, I think Tony Wagner checked out after we yelled at him.
And, I think if Tony Wagner is listening, I think he learned a very valuable lesson, which is what I tried to teach him in the other episode. Ace crushes on everyone. I literally said Ripley and Elastigirl, Kristen Stewart. Yeah. I crush on everyone, bro.
Yeah.
I ain't got no biases towards any type of girl.
Yeah, man. I've always had a big crush on Zoe Saldana.
Let's get into that. So this movie brought about performance capture, and we got to see digitally created actors, not creatures, not Watto in Phantom Menace, not Dexter Jettster in Attack of the Clones, who was initially an actor as well on set. But the problem with that is that they just created an animation and then just used his voice acting. This is very different. This is very much an actor is acting that creature. They are that creature. Josh Brolin's, Thanos. That's Josh Brolin. That a lot of people still don't understand that concept fairly enough. A lot of older audiences might still think that's a CGI creature, but they don't know that that's an actual actor inside a suit acting that performance. Yeah. And it comes with those performance capture cameras that are directly in your face. And this also leads into what we see now, which I don't know if you guys are into E3, but every video game now uses that. Every single one. There's not a single video game that doesn't use that. And it's a huge influence on what we see nowadays when it comes to the creation of movies that use performance capture people. And it starts with Zoe Saldana, who gives an incredible performance.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like, it's one of those things where she gives her all into this role. And a lot of people might discount that because it's digitally enhanced. And I think that's kind of unfair, especially when she literally gave her all for this.
Right. I mean, I could definitely see both sides of it. You know,
Sure.
I could definitely see.
When it comes to awards, I have a different take. But when it comes to that was a dope performance.
It definitely was a dope performance. And speaking of awards, I mean, she was in heavy consideration for Best Actress that year that Avatar came out, but ultimately they just ruled that they couldn't. You know, they just didn't get nominated. And you know, that's the thing we saw same thing with Andy Serkis with Gollum and with Caesar, Gollum and Lord of the Rings and Caesar when Planet of the Apes movies.
Yeah, I really feel like her performance is just overall it's really good. Really, it holds up. Like you can tell she is acting. She's not just a creature effect. Like she's actually given a performance that's very compelling, right? I mean, because she cries in this movie, and I remember I saw an interview where she and James Cameron were talking about that scene, and it's the loss of the tree. I forget the name of the tree.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
And they were saying that you know that scene wasn't just losing a tree; it's something physical in nature. It was like you losing a family member. Like they have that kind of deep connection, right? Because that's the big theme in the movie is that their connection to nature is almost, you know, biological. In a sense, right? And that's kind of a theme that keeps coming up throughout the movie. Obviously, with the tails that everyone makes fun of.
Right.
I see you. Shout out to I see you. But yeah, it's a big step forward in what we're seeing nowadays when it comes to performance and performance capture.
Right.
So shout out to Zoe Saldana, my fellow Latina. Because we don't got that many, man.
Yeah.
We gotta point them out.
Yeah, I mean, of course, she said some she's done some controversial things, but still appreciate her.
Really? What did she say?
Well, she didn't say anything.
Oh, is it the Nina Simone?
The Nina Simone
Gotcha.
thing? Yeah. But hey, man, I still appreciate it.
I'm super biased because she's super Latina, and I'm like, hell yeah. Like she promotes stuff in Spanish. Like she's dope, man.
That's dope. Yeah, that's cool, man.
Because a lot of Latino people like are just like, yeah, I'm Latino, kind of. But she's like very like she'll go to like the Dominican Republic. She'll like talk about movies in Spanish. She has like her own website that's all about Latinos, and I support her. But yeah, I'm with you on that argument though, on that Simone argument.
Right?
Is it Nina Simone?
Nina Simone, yeah, Nina Simone.
I'm with you on that. But yeah. Either way, shout out to Zoe Saldana.
Yeah.
At least for me, because RB3. No,
still love you, Zoe Saldana, but
yeah, man, for a movie. You said this is the movie that inspired you to get into filmmaking. Yeah. Can I know why?
Well, I think it's the mixture of the technology and the message, right, and the story. You know, because growing up, I was studying like math and science and engineering, and you know, my mother and my parents wanted me to pursue that as a career. But Avatar was but I've always just loved movies and loved storytelling and like loved acting and all that stuff in general. So Avatar was just kind of like the bridge in between that to a certain extent. So I always appreciated it on that level, on that front of it being a great, like genuinely classic example of the mixture of technological advancements and a really meaningful story and stuff like that.
And meaningful filmmaking. Right?
Yeah, meaningful filmmaking.
The combination of the both.
Right. I mean, plus, I mean, just a really awesomely like cool looking movie. You know, like, there's not as many movies that look as good as Avatar does. You know,
it's also James Cameron. I got to talk about the military in this movie, like we've done all episode. But James Cameron's exoskeleton military.
Oh, right.
Making a comeback from Aliens.
Yeah, right. Again, exactly. It's like it's flipped around his head, and maybe that's why a lot of people don't like Avatar because it takes away from the original. You know, what they fell in love with him originally for. But I still think this is dope. This is my generation's, I guess, Aliens, of course. And I'm excited for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, however many they make, you know? So hoping it's decent.
Let's talk about Sam. Is it Sam Worthington?
Sam Worthington, yeah.
Let's talk about Sam Worthington. This is how he got his start, Mr. Australian actor Sam Worthington.
That and Terminator Salvation.
Yeah, but this was first,
Cameron.
Right?
I think Terminator Salvation came out.
Well, was it? Oh, I might be wrong. Sorry.
I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
Actually, you might be right. I don't know.
What are your thoughts on Mr. Sam Worthington, who's currently listening to this?
They tried to make him a star. It didn't work out. All too bad. Yeah. But
it's Clash of Titans, man. That sank his career, in my opinion. That sank him. You remember those movies?
Oh yeah, I remember. Ooh. I definitely remember.
Ooh. I mean, he seems like a nice guy.
Yeah, I mean, he seems cool. I mean, hey, listen, he was dope and some. Actually, I can't really think of anything else that he's in, really, if I'm being honest.
Terminator Salvation.
Yeah, he was just a random dude in that, right? It was like a new character for Terminator Salvation?
No, he plays the machine.
Is Kyle Reese?
No, he plays the machine.
Was he John Connor?
No. He just plays the original OG, like the T-100 or some shit.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. Well.
No, he plays the first man experiment. The cyborg, a combination between man and machine kind of thing.
Oh, okay. I don't think I ever watched Terminator Salvation.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
RB3, man. Either way, he tried. Sorry, man. Shout out to Sam. I still like you.
Cameron gave you 2 chances, bro. You still couldn't hit it.
Hey, man.
Blockbusters.
Either way, shout out to Michelle Rodriguez in this movie, who plays the military. Very similar to Vasquez. Would you say that, Mr. RB3?
Yeah, definitely very similar.
Seeing some themes come out.
Right.
I see. Here's my final thing on Cameron. This is my final thing, so you can say yours. My final thing on Cameron is I really like where his head is at, personally. And I really like the directions he's taking, not only as a director, but as a producer. I know a lot of people might say, what about the Terminator movies? You're right, those movies are awful. The new ones, I guess. And they should stop. They should just stop. Even though it won't. And I know, what's his face? Mike Miller? Not Mike Miller. Doug Miller?
Tim Miller.
Tim Miller.
Yeah, Tim Miller.
Tim Miller is currently in production making the new one, which apparently is going to be great. Fingers crossed. But the thing that stands out the most to me that Cameron is currently doing, that's going to come out November, is Alita Battle Angel, which apparently he has a very heavy hand as a producer with that movie. But Alita Battle Angel is a combination of 2 things I love: anime and Latino. Latino people. And the cast is super Latino. I was very critical of her face, which the lead character's face, played by, I'm going to look it up, but because for me personally, I just don't like, you're giving a leading role to a Latina actress, and then you're putting her behind a mask. And I know that's a digital mask, and I know that's something that Cameron loves doing. But to me, it's something that, I don't know, I'm assuming you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I saw a trailer,
just to enhance her eyes, I don't know. To me personally, I feel like just to make it look anime, it doesn't convince me. I'd rather see someone who's not. And I know that's part of the manga, that she's supposed to be very cyborg looking. I get it. I just personally feel like there could have done something better. However, I love the cast. It's Mahershala Ali, has Michelle Rodriguez, Isaac Gonzalez, who I've talked about before.
It's directed by Robert Rodriguez too, right?
Directed by Robert Rodriguez. And this goes into my Terminator talk too. The Terminator sequel, it also has a huge Latin cast. It has Diego Boneta, it has some other actresses, it has a Colombian actress as the lead in that movie. So personally, when it comes to James Cameron, he may have made some mistakes in the past when it comes to casting, but what he's doing now, as far as giving Latinos an opportunity to be in big blockbuster type movies, Alita Battle Angel and the new Terminator, is bold, it's big, and it's in your face, and it's very, very pro Latinos, pro, Mexicans, and pro all these people from this culture that I personally feel like we should have. And we're doing it with Alita, and we're doing it with Terminator.
Yeah.
End of rant.
Nah, man. I mean, it's dope that they casting more Latinas, and people of color and women of color these parts. And it's amazing that Alita Battle Angel is finally coming out after all these years of development hell, I guess. I guess the guys thing. I mean, I don't really have much of an opinion on it. I do kind of agree. It's like taken away from the face of having it, but at the same time, I guess if it serves the story, But
I just feel like it's her name is Rosa Salazar, by the way. I feel like this is her big opportunity. I know she's in the Maze Runner movies. That's where I first was introduced to her, and personally, that's where I was like, I like this girl. I remember saying that as I watched the Scorch Trials, I think it was. But that was her big coming out party, and now I feel like this is her taking a leading role. Like a Latina in a leading role is very bold. And I think she's great, so I hope the movie's okay. I don't even want good, I just want okay.
right.
But I don't know, those are my last thoughts on Cameron. I don't know if you have any final closing thoughts.
I mean, yeah, Cameron, he's had a long filmography, very, very brilliant filmmaker, has a very limited number of films, for somebody who's been around for so long. But he definitely has a great eye for blockbuster cinema that is lost, I think in the modern era. So I greatly appreciate his contributions to that front, at least. And the advancements in technology and projection and all this kind of stuff in the future. Salute to Cameron for all of that. I just don't think, if he starts talking about superhero movies, we should take him too seriously. So.
Yeah. He's a grumpy old man, guys. Get over it. A lot of grumpy old guys say a lot of dumb things.
But Cameron, we love you still.
We love you. I love you.
Yeah, if you're watching, we're good. Come on our show. Come talk to us about it. We'll interview you.
Definitely not. But, he won't do it. But if he wants to, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're losing to Snelling and
right.
I was gonna say we can't even keep up with this.
Start the beef, fam. Start the beef.
But either way, he's the director that inspired RB3 to become a director. So in a way, that's pretty powerful, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Either way, guys, that was our episode. Leave us some comments on the episode itself. What did you think? Hopefully, you guys enjoyed for the most part. We went a little long, but that's okay, guys. We love you guys, and we would love to hear your feedback. And for the Meaning Of podcast, I'm Ace.
This is RB3.
And we are peacing out for the Meaning Of podcast, guys. Peace out.